Councilmember Schmidt, Mayor Shepherd. Council's going into close. We have 5 present. Council's going into closed session labor negotiators with the International Association of Firefighters and regarding the Palo Alto Police Officers Association. And we have no speaker cards.
Long agenda. So we've just returned from closed session, and now we are taking up agenda changes, additions, and deletions. And under this, I just wanted to point out a couple of things that colleagues have at their places, and that is that we have the action items for what are coming up for the last 3 meetings that we have before we go on break in July. We're not going to be having a meeting on June 30th. Even though we can meet up and through then, but I believe we already have colleagues that are gone by that point. So I wanted colleagues to consider whether or not we should start our meetings at 5 to get our work done, or if we should hold an extra meeting on the 18th. And if you could just kind of take a look at that throughout the meeting, perhaps people could make comments at the end under council member comments. With that, at this point, there's no agenda changes, and let's go to the city manager's comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did just want to, I think it would be worthwhile just restating real quickly, right, that item number 7 that's on the consent agenda has been recommended to be continued to June 9th, correct? So there were some concerns about the way that was titled, but it will be back with a slightly modified title at the meeting on June 9th. So if I can get started with a few comments from the city manager. If you look on the small screens in front of you or up on the large screen on the wall here, this is a picture of a redwood tree which was planted in Oaxaca, Mexico 50 years ago when Oaxaca became a sister city to Palo Alto. And at that time, the Oaxaca Council wasn't sure the tree would be able to grow at that latitude, but felt that it was an appropriate symbol of friendship between the two cities, as the tree represented friendship and long life. So today the tree is doing well, and 7 years ago the tree was rededicated in a ceremony with Palo Alto visitors. The mayor and council members Nis and Sharf and myself will be in Oaxaca next week, actually celebrating and recognizing the 50th anniversary of the sister city relationship. So it's doing well. The community is cordially invited to visit the Palo Alto Art Center from June 3rd through the 29th to view an exhibit of original artwork included in the Places to Play in Palo Alto book that was presented to you by the Advisory Committee on Early Child Care and Education last month. The artwork featured at the exhibit and the book was created by children ages 3 to 6 and showcases their favorite places to play in Palo Alto. And so for more information, folks can go to the City of Palo Alto website, cityofpaloalto.org/childcare. From our planning director, many thanks to council members Klein and Schmidt for attending the first of 3 planning workshops related to the comprehensive plan update last Thursday. I know a number of other council members were otherwise detained in the Finance Committee meeting that evening. About 40 community members gathered to identify and discuss the city's key opportunities and challenges for the future. And the meeting coincided with the release of a formal notice that the environmental review impact report process will be prepared, as well as an orientation brochure about the comprehensive plan and its importance to our city. The community engagement effort will continue with rollout of our online engagement tool on Friday, June 6th, and a second workshop on the evening of Tuesday, June 10th. That workshop will include a presentation and discussion about growth management strategies, and we'll consider how other communities manage and direct growth, discuss what works and what doesn't. And the meeting will be held at Palo in the English Resource Center starting at 6 p.m. That's next Tuesday, June 10th. And finally, a third workshop will be held on June 24th, and we'll use the outcomes from those first two workshops as a basis for discussing alternative futures. Just a reminder that the staff is also accepting applications for the leadership group that will help ramp up the community engagement effort, and applications will be accepted through June 15th. Interested members of the public are encouraged to apply. Our Palo Alto Fire Department is playing a leadership role in the regional wildfire fire training. And each year, over 100 personnel participate in the exercise to prepare for the wildland fire season. This is an opportunity for all of the Santa Clara County fire departments, law enforcement agencies, emergency management service organizations, park rangers, and other partners to practice together. And this level of cooperation and coordination makes Santa Clara County much better prepared for any type of emergency or disaster we might experience. Both Deputy Chiefs Gio Blackshire and Catherine Caprilis have assumed leadership roles within the exercise planning team in Santa Clara County. Two other reports real quickly. The city's summer camps and aquatics programs got started today. It begins with a week-long training called In Service, and the training includes leadership development, developmental assets, bullying, prevention, customer service, and inclusiveness, among many topics. Our Community Services Department hires more than 200 local high school and college-age students as camp counselors across our city, lifeguards, swim instructors, etc. Special thanks to Councilmember Berman for being a keynote speaker at this morning's in-service training, and he's missing this thank you and accolade.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, there you go. He delivered an inspirational speech reflecting on his experience growing up in Palo Alto and the important role summer staff can have on the well-being of youth and teens. And then lastly, I wanted to clarify a little bit of confusion before you get to the consent calendar on item number 4, which really is an item dealing with approval of agreements with the San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority. And I think it really relates to some confusion, unintended and inaccurate facts that have generated some confusion related to the potential for flood walls along the creek project. And I think the easiest way to look at this is, first of all, the action before the council tonight really is dealing with the improvements, ultimately the funding for the improvements between the downstream 101 and the Bay Highway 101 project, and then potential bridge improvements at Newell and Pope Chaucer Bridge. And any issues related to any kinds of upstream alternatives are actually being evaluated separately in the Joint Powers Authority Environmental Review report that is underway, and will have to take into account a range of impacts. So I think that perhaps something that the district put out might have generated that confusion, but we did want to clear it up since this item is on council consent. And that is all I have to report. Thank you. Oh, I did have one other item, excuse me. There's some questions that were raised about Proposition 42, which is on the ballot tomorrow. And it's a constitutional amendment to require local agencies to comply with the California Public Records Act and the otherwise known as the Brown Act, and any subsequent amendments that further the constitutional provisions on public access to public meetings and records. And I think the League of California Cities has had some real issues with the way this proposition is worded because of the cost impact that it would push additionally onto cities. And I would just say we have not taken a position on this proposition. Typically, we do oppose any unfunded mandates from the states, but our city and our council has made open government such a priority, and our basic practice is in alignment with what is being requested here right now, that we're really already voluntarily complying with this as proposed, and so no position was advanced as far as this proposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have oral communications, and this is a time when members of the public may speak on any item not on the agenda. So we have a few cards tonight, and we'll be giving you 3 minutes. Our first speaker will be Herb Borak, to be followed by Rainier Pitham.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Shepherd and council members. I realize city officials may not read the Daily Post. However, there was in Friday's edition a newspaper ad for the notice of preparation for the comprehensive plan update. I wasn't aware, and I don't believe, that the Daily Post has been adjudicated as a newspaper of general circulation, and therefore is not an appropriate place to satisfy the legal requirements for posting notice for something subject to the California Environmental Quality Act. The publishers of this newspaper had previously published the Palo Alto Daily News, and when they attempted to have that newspaper adjudicated as a newspaper of general circulation, the Palo Alto Weekly's attorney, Gene McCown, was successful in having the judge deny that in Santa Clara County. So since they the same people weren't able to get adjudicated as a newspaper of general circulation when they published the Daily News in this county, I don't believe they even tried for the Daily Post. The only local newspaper of general circulation that I believe is appropriate for such a public notice for a California Environmental Quality Act matter would be the Palo Alto Weekly. So I would request that staff confirm that that it's not published in the appropriate newspaper and instead republish it in the correct newspaper. Thank you.
Thank you. Rainier Pitham, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong, to be followed by Sally Lieber.
Pronunciation of my name wasn't bad. In the last week, I read in the papers the latest report of one or the other of the parking consultants. Punchline was, there's enough parking if only the residents of Palo Alto would allow parking in the residential streets. I have lived in Evergreen Park from '83 to 2005, and after 7 years sabbatical from Palo Alto from 12 to now. But it doesn't matter precisely where I live because I walk a lot. I walk crisscross. And while originally I noticed 20 years ago the parkers came from Cal Avenue, and so in the mornings they slowly filled Cambridge, Oxford, Stanford, Birch, Ash. At some point, all of a sudden, they came also from the direction of El Camino, and they would park their car and would take their bicycle and take off. So when you can only guess where they would go. So I think Evergreen Park is pretty much overparked. Sometimes I couldn't get out of my driveway because somebody was parking there. You call the police. And I think Evergreen Park should have a permit parking program. And in fact, I think maybe we should do what some other towns do, like around Harvard University. This is the default. But they give the locals generously parking slips for visitors so that family life and the social life can go on. So I think the city should think about this, whether that shouldn't be the default. And parking in a residential street. Free parking in the residential street would be the exception. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally Lieber, to be followed by Dana St. George.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to come before you tonight to talk with you for a couple moments about the subject of gun violence prevention. I know that everyone on Council is very aware of current and daily ongoing events related to that topic and to the fact that we really have what is a public health epidemic of gun violence in terms of crime, accidents, and injuries due to guns in our society. And I've had a chance to look through Palo Alto's ordinances related to that, and so I do want to commend you for the very good work that's been done in Palo Alto, but also urge you, if possible, to take on some additional items. And last November in the city of Sunnyvale, we had a ballot measure which actually garnered the highest number of votes of any question on the ballot and passed by more than 2/3 that put forward 4 initiatives: safe storage of guns, whether or not children are on the premises, a duty to report lost and stolen guns, a ban on the possession of magazines of more than 10 rounds, the sale of which is already banned in California, and the keeping of ammunition sales records, something that can be very, very important to public safety. As was promised before that measure was even put on the ballot, gun rights advocates have sued on 2 of those questions, on the magazines and ammunition records, but they have not been successful in the federal courts thus far. And so I did bring some materials that I'd like to forward to the city clerk. And if there is a member of council that would like at the end of tonight's meeting to ask staff to develop a report to bring back more information, I'd be very obliged. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana St. George, to be followed by Lois Salo.
Hello. Yes, I heard on the radio last week or the week before that Santa Cruz County banned fracking. I was so surprised, but really made me feel happy. And I thought, whoa, that is really good. And you know, is there really danger that that's going to happen right here in California? Well, apparently it already is in lots of places. I didn't know that. And so I thought it would be a good idea to bring it up here at the council meeting, because Palo Alto is sort of a city that kind of leads the way sometimes. And I'd like to suggest that the council consider it. Putting some kind of ban or statement out against fracking. And I think that would be really a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Lois Salvo, to be followed by William Langs Grief.
Good evening, and I'd like to add to Dana's statement. I'm Lois Salo. That fracking will use a huge amount of water, which we certainly can't afford to use, and also it will possibly cause earthquakes, and the water that is used will be then useless for that. So I would like us to join the cities of, well, this is the county of Santa Cruz County, and they have decided to ban fracking, and they have joined my organization, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, with a consortium of groups to decide that this is ecologically indefensible. And I think that Palo Alto, because it is environmentally caring, should also make that statement. So the city of, the two other cities. One is Compton, and the other is, oh, sorry, I can't remember the other city, but and several counties have done this also. So please, very seriously, think about joining the groups that are banning fracking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. William Landgraf, to be followed by Sven and Sophia Genevieve.
Members of the City Council and Honorable Mayor, I would like to take this opportunity to express my thanks to Pat Burt for his analysis of and perception of facts regarding the $1.4 billion generated by the 2000 sales tax, which Carl Giardino had promoted. Mr. Giardino claims that he had no idea how these funds were allocated to the North County Caltrans. He and his staff did not reply to Pat Burt's inquiry regarding the important subject. It was later determined through a post-inquiry that only 4% of this total, $1.4 billion, was allocated to the Caltrans, while 46% was gobbled up by the extension of BART. It is now easy to see why BART's claim that they were under budget and under time in their efforts to extend the San Jose BART extension. What is now clear, none of us have an unambiguous view of how the 2000 sales tax money was being allocated, mostly for BART and little known for North County Caltrans. This distortion of the facts by Giardino's group makes it impossible to have an objective judgment about the needs for another sales tax increase. Can we believe Giordano's statements? What our council needs to do is have more members like Pat Burt, and now and in the future. We should worry less about the number of council members or the time they can serve on the council. We need now new members to have informed clarity for objectivity in decisions. I would suggest that future members of our city councils have some training in finance and accounting to help them through the analysis of such budgetary items. Econ or accounting courses might help to see the light in critical situations. Perhaps some engineering or science background would help one to see things more objectively.
Thank you. Sven, Sophia Genevieve Thiessen. And I see school is out.
Exactly. Evening, council members. Today was a historic moment for the Obama administration. As you may be aware, their EPA proposed new rules for power plants, particularly coal-burning power plants. As you're aware, we are facing an incredible climate crisis. As such, I'd like to propose, and I've called several of you to do so, that we form a motion to write a letter to the Obama administration, Pelosi, Boxer, Feinstein, supporting and encouraging them to go further. And the joy is we have a messenger in that of Gil Friend to write such a letter. If only you would encourage him to do so. So if possible, if you could make that happen as an agenda item to be voted on next week, or however mechanic-wise you can do that, I think Palo Alto being the first city to support such regulations, particularly given our carbon footprint associated with our electricity, and that's your pop quiz, what is it? What is the carbon footprint associated with our electricity? You can do it with your arms. 0. We're one of the first cities in the nation to have that. So please act on some sort of letter of support to the Obama administration for these new power plant regulations.
Hi, I'm Genevieve. I'm 9 and I'm going into 4th grade. And I forgot.
I support the power plant regulations. I want strong power plant regulations.
I want strong power.
Yeah, that's right.
and I want strong power plant regulations. You made me say that. Hello, I'm Sophie, and I'm going in 3rd grade. I love animals, and that was my line. Whatever.
Guys, this is important. They're gonna.
And I just want to say, I wish Obama said no on the pipeline that second, not this waiting a long time.
Thank you. Roberta Alquist, to be followed by Shani Kleinhaus.
My name is Roberta Alquist. I'm a member of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And as you know, the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to ban fracking in the county. And about 6 other counties are pursuing and considering a ban, including Butte, Mendocino, Monterey, Santa Barbara, San Benito, and Orange County. Beverly Hills was the first city in the state to ban fracking. Obviously, climate change is a serious issue. We have a severe drought. Toxic chemicals don't serve anyone short-term, long-term. The earthquake potential is very dangerous. It's an environmentally unsound practice. We advocate that you support a ban on fracking, and if you need more information, there are 2 films out on fracking, 2 documentaries, Gasland 1 and 2, which document what's going on in Pennsylvania as a result of fracking, and North Dakota is probably going to be next.
Thank you. And our final speaker under oral communication is Shani Kleinhaus.
This is oral communication.
This is oral communication. Do you have a card?
Yes. For item number 7. Oh, Sherry's.
I see it. I see that for consent calendar, item 7.
So Sherry didn't want to do 7. We added 7 to it.
Hang on. Let's go ahead with Sherry, and we'll clear this up. If the clerk could work with our speakers out here to see whether or not they. So I'm sorry, Shani. Go ahead, please.
I'm Shani Kleinhaus. I live in South Palo Alto, and I'm here on behalf of Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. I'm their environmental advocate. And what I wanted to talk to you today about is bird-safe building design. I think I probably talked to some of you about this individually. Every year, the estimate is between 300 millions and 1 billion birds are killed by collision into glass structures in the States. LEED and green building guidelines fall short on protecting those birds. In the past, there were no solutions. We didn't know what to do. We knew the problem exists, but we didn't know what can be done about it. In the past 2 years, a lot of solutions emerged. Following the availability of solutions, several cities started passing ordinances and guidelines to include bird-safe design in project review and as they look at buildings and what is created in the cities. And the first ones on the West Coast, I think the first one was Portland, followed by San Francisco and Oakland, and most recently Sunnyvale adopted bird-safe design guidelines. I only introduced the concept to you today, and I will be coming back. I already talked to the sustainability and Gil Friend about it because there is no reason to cause death of birds when we do know that there are solutions available, some of them very simple. So thank you.
Thank you. Consent speaker. Okay. Thank you. That concludes the oral communication, and I'm moving to the consent calendar, of which I have a number of speakers. So let's take the speakers first. We have Maria Makela on item number 4, to be followed by Fred Ballin on item number 7, and Sherry Furman on item number 7. You have 3 minutes.
Hi. Good evening, council members and mayor. I have to lift it. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so I was saying good evening to you. Thanks for the prompt. I live on Palo Alto Avenue, right across this street from the creek, and close to the Poe Chaucer Bridge. And since we saw the plans for the bridge with, this industrial bridge and huge walls and other things that were proposed, we've been really worried that the whole character of our neighborhood would change. We really, at least the people that I've talked to, which is quite a few neighbors, don't want to see gigantic flood walls and the removal of trees that would entail. We think that there are other solutions. Obviously, the downstream stuff is very important that's being worked on at 101 and near the golf course and so on. And then upstream, we think that the problems could be solved with retention ponds and diversion via culverts. And anyway, we would request you to, in your negotiations with the Joint Powers Authority, to specify that that we wouldn't like to have flood walls included in the plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Fred Ballin, to be followed by Sherry Furman.
Good evening. On May 2nd, I filed an appeal of the Mayfield, California Avenue project. The appeal is required to appear on the council consent calendar within 30 days. Today is the deadline. It is included as a half page with request for continuance to next Monday. An appellant has just 14 days following city decision to file with all supporting documentation, so I decided to address you tonight. This is not an ordinary ARB-related appeal. I have written 2 emails that this is an appeal of a director's decision, and the scope of the appeal extends beyond the ARB hearing. For example, the ARB has nothing to do with the fire code. The week after I filed, postcard notices were sent out for a planning commission hearing to review a tentative subdivision map for the project. I argued the hearing was premature because if the appeal is heard and the elements changed, it could alter the map. The release of the staff report noted the appeal and triggered the recent coverage in the press. The commission went forward Wednesday night, and after public comment, voices from the dais and podium remarked on a low turnout of residents compared to last year's hearing, and signs that things are working out well with neighbors and the Residents Association on this project. I served on the Residents Association board for 4 years prior to the end of my most recent term in March, and I can tell you that is not the case. In fact, residents and board members were so dissatisfied with the lack of meaningful progress on this project that a few months ago, the board initiated a petition drive directed over the heads of their direct contacts in Stanford's real estate group and placed 600 individually signed documents on the desks of John Hennessy and 3 other higher-ups at the university. This appeal covers matters related to safety, impacting residents both in and outside the project, as well as signs of a code exception policy that can affect all residents. And therefore, I want to thank all the concerned citizens who have come to sit with me tonight to show that people in town are concerned, interested, and watching. Please raise your hand if you came. Next week, you are scheduled to decide whether or not to remove this appeal from the consent calendar, and if so, how and when to hear it. If it is removed, the city's attorney's office has informed me that it will become a quasi-judicial item, a matter whose decision is to be based upon facts and evidence known to all parties. And I see no difference in the current interim period prior to release of the staff report and up to your decision on next Monday. Over the years, I've pressed a number of transparency causes, including this one. You will hear from me via email after staff report release and here next week. I will not, however, be contacting any member of the council in private with regard to this matter. But you are the enforcers of council policy, and I trust that you will not allow yourself to be lobbied in private at any time during this appeal, not from the applicant and its agents, not from residents, not from anyone, and that you will take up this matter with a completely neutral mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry Furman, to be followed by William Ross.
Good evening, Mayor Shepherd, council members. I'm sorry for the earlier mix-up, but as I start talking, you'll see why. I'm also here to talk about the appeal process, but I want to talk about it on a broad basis. As one who's filed an appeal, you know, it takes time and money and effort to do so, and I think if we bother to do that, it should be heard by council instead of just automatically being put on the consent calendar, because usually it goes back to the people who approved the project that we're appealing in the first place, so it's almost like the fox in the hen house. You know, I mean, of course they're going to say you should deny the appeal because we were right in the first place. And as part of open government, frankly, I think if we file an appeal, we're entitled to have it heard before you. So I ask that you think about this and perhaps take it to policy and services to make appeals heard by the entire council. I think that's only fair to the residents who go to the trouble to file one. And then on an entirely different subject, I just want to say, would you please stop calling us the usual suspects? I think it's insulting to those of us who have, over the years, put in the time and energy to serve on committees, educate ourselves, come to meetings, and then be dismissed as, oh, you're just the usual suspects. We want to hear from new people. So you may not have meant it that way, but those of us, many of us have taken it as a pejorative. So thank you.
Thank you. William Ross, to be followed by Lois Salo. I'm sorry, this is still item number 7.
Good evening. I support everything that Mr. Balin has said. I would only add a procedural due process issue, saying that numerous residents on this specific case have received inconsistent indications from city planning staff that they weren't entitled to notice. For example, an indication that you are beyond 600 feet. So there's also a record of incomplete notice or inconsistent positions being taken by city staff about who's entitled to notice. That in and of itself should be a strong indication on a quasi-judicial matter, 1094.5, as you've said for other appeals associated with the ARP, that this matter should be taken up in total by the council. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lois Salo on item number 8.
I'm Lois Salo, and I noticed that item 8 is a resolution approving the city participation in the Santa Clara County Home Consortium for purposes of securing federal home funding. I have been unable to find anything on the agenda which explores that more fully. What I am concerned about is that 2 items. One is that the Buena Vista housing can be part of HUD funds or eminent domain or some way for the city to buy that property and allow those people to remain in their homes. And I also note that the low-income housing has not been, I have not seen any low-income housing being built or on the agenda to be built. And this is a serious concern of Palo Alto. As we know, rents and property is going up, and middle-income people and low-income people cannot afford to live in Palo Alto. So Palo Alto needs to find and take a serious look at finding properties to buy and building low-income housing for lower-income people in our society. We need more Stevenson houses for the many people who need low-income housing also. So please, I don't know what the amount budgeted, but it seems to me that we should explore getting much more in the way of funds for these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie Munoz on item number 8.
Good evening, council members. I'm Stephanie Munoz, and I have to say, essentially a continuation of what Mrs. Salo just told you. I'm concerned about the cavalier way in which we seem to think that as long as it's the federal government or the state government or some philanthropist that's paying for some social good, that's like free money. But it's actually just an attempt to do what society ought to do. And I believe that we have some kind of a duty to house, or at least to provide shelter, to people who are out in the elements, who, through no fault of their own, at least they've tried to earn a living, they've tried to get enough to have a house, and they just can't make it. But what concerns me most about getting money from or trying to get money from the federal government and in grants is it seems to me that we aren't doing very much with the money we already have or the assets we already have. And I thought of that particularly with the discussion about the History Museum and the Roth Museum. The city of Palo Alto owned the Roth building outright. And with response to what I would call an extortionate demand by the developer who had not put in enough green space in the houses, the city of Palo Alto was persuaded that it ought to destroy an office building which could have held every single nonprofit in the entire city. Palo Alto Housing Corporate, well, the list is long. Now, the Buena Vista people, on the other hand, are faced with a situation in which, by action of the city, not just the economy going up, but by action of the city, they are going to be forced to leave their homes to be demolished. These are homes which are worth quite a lot in terms of housing, in terms of what the city would have to pay if it were going to house these human beings, like something like $150 a square foot. And they live in sort of shabby, but acceptably shabby trailers, and they're willing to do that. And they've made that provision for themselves. They pay their taxes, they feed and clothe their children and make sure they do their homework. They do their duty for society. And I do not believe that it is appropriate to destroy their homes.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Item number 12, Herb Borak, and then we're going to be returning to item number 3 with Shawnee Kleinhaus.
Thank you, Mayor Shepherd.
Can you step into the mic?
Into the mic. How about that? This is item is on the resolution calling the general municipal election. However, in the report from the city clerk, the clerk recommends eliminating the requirement from the charter that candidates' names be determined by lot, and concludes that, therefore, Palo Alto would then use the random name order set by the Secretary of State. Well, the council can't eliminate something from the charter. I believe that that provision of the charter should remain. However, I do agree that we should do what we've done for the past 3 elections, and that's use the Secretary of State's random ballot order. In the past, Palo Alto felt that the only way to choose candidates' names by lot was to have a Palo Alto high school student do it at a city council meeting in August. When they tried to do that in the 2007 time period for that election, the council couldn't get a quorum. So the clerk, with the advice of the city attorney, used the Secretary of State's random ballot order without any action by the council to do so, and of course it seemed to be the appropriate thing to do. 2 years later, there was a resolution before the council to do the same thing, and at that time I suggested that that be included in the Palo Alto Municipal Code so that it would be clear that that was the means to implement the charter provision for choosing names by lot. At the last election, I believe the random ballot order from the Secretary of State was used without any action by the City Council. So it seems to me that the appropriate thing would be for the council to direct the city attorney to bring a draft ordinance before you next week to implement that provision of the charter by using the Secretary of State's randomized ballot order and alphabet. And if sometime in the future some other means is being used in the state, you can just simply change that ordinance. If the first reading was on your agenda next week, you could adopt the ordinance and it would be in effect in time for this election, even taking into account your vacation. However, if you wait too long to do it, then you could do it just the way it's been done in the past 3 elections, which is to just do it without any action by the council. I do believe it is better to create the institutional memory and to include it in the codified municipal code that the way to implement ballot order by lot is to use the one that's available now in Election Code Section 13,011F. Otherwise,
Thank you.
We may forget. Thank you.
Thank you. And Shawnee Kleinhaus on item number 3.
Thank you. Shawnee Kleinhaus for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, and I'm here to support approving a power purchase agreement with the Hayward Solar Renewable. Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society generally believes that solar belongs on roofs and not consume habitat and open space for the development of solar industrial landscapes. We have seen some of those desert power plants irreversibly destroying habitat, sensitive habitat, damaging endangered species, and killing migratory birds at a cost of billions to the American taxpayer. So several of our groups, including Santa Clara Valley Audubon, sued at least one project that we consider to be extremely damaging, and that's in San Benito County. It's called SolarGen in Panoche Valley. We hope you never consider a power purchase agreement with that company. So we checked the Hayward project very, very closely to see whether that is a good project. And we found out we're satisfied. We found out first that the site currently grows alfalfa and potatoes and some oil wells. That's not great habitat for wildlife, especially not endangered wildlife. And we also found out that the Redwood Solar Cluster in Kern County, which the Hayward project is part of, includes the parent company is 8 Minute Energy, which received support from California Audubon in the Imperial Valley. That's because they not only considered how to place their solar energy and not damage environmental sensitive habitats, but they also mitigated fully for impacts to boring owls and went beyond mitigation in contributing a lot of money to research for boring owls and how to place solar right. So they're a good company, and so we're happy at the work that staff did in recommending this power purchase agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes oral communications portion of consent calendar. And now I'm moving to the consent calendar, and I need a motion to...
Second.
And Councilmember Price has moved the consent calendar, seconded by the Vice Mayor. Let's vote. Go ahead and vote. Oh, I'm sorry. I have a light. Councilmember Klein.
Yes, please list me as not participating in item number 7. It concerns Stanford University, and my wife is a Stanford faculty member.
Thank you. Everything's shifted. And that motion carries with Councilmember Klein voting yes on everything except for item number 8. Okay. 7. Well, we don't have your light on up there. And that brings us to our action items. And I just want to point out that we have some fairly unrealistic times here on our action items tonight. Our first item, item number 8, is the is a public hearing with the El Camino Real sidewalk ordinance. And there's a number of elements in here. We do have a few speakers, or a number of speaker cards here already. So there is a lot of communication that we will be hearing from. And it looks like I might have to limit this to 2 minutes for oral communication in order to keep our time frame close to being able to stay on schedule. Our next item number 19, is the letter that Policy and Services has prepared for us regarding the sales tax initiative that Silicon Valley Leadership Group is pulling for next week. That we've allowed for a half hour on. Item number 20 is the administrative draft of the housing element. We've allowed an hour for that, but that is a substantive item as well. And then finally, we have the cleanup, or not the cleanup, but the item of our infrastructure funding along with the transit occupancy tax. We've allowed 45 minutes for that, and it's unclear to me whether or not we'll get all of this finished. So we have prepared a schedule of action items that are going on for the next 3 meetings before we go into break in June. So if we have to push something out to another meeting, let's strategically look at this to see whether or not we should be calling a meeting on June 18th on a Wednesday to cover some of the unfinished business. With that, let's take up item number 18. This is a public hearing on a possible El Camino Real sidewalk ordinance that would increase sidewalk widths along major thoroughfares in the city. In January of 2014, the City Council also requested that staff work on an ordinance to reduce the floor area ratio for a limited number of sites that are zoned neighborhood commercial and allow for residential densities of 20 dwelling units per acre due to their listing on the housing inventory. After working with commissions, staff has prepared 3 possible actions. 1, an ordinance where the city could impose setbacks based on context of up to 10 feet on new development in order to achieve an effective sidewalk width of 18 feet, if appropriate, replacing the current code, which requires a 12-foot setback. Or 2, defer the adaptation as recommended by the Plan and Transportation Commission, and consider the issues during the comprehensive plan update. Or 3, adopt a modified ordinance reflecting the Architectural Review Board's recommendation to omit changes to density, the floor area ratio, and permit effective sidewalk widths of 9 feet where appropriate in front of retail uses. So with that, staff has a presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mayor Shepherd, council members.
I'm sorry, I couldn't tell if that was from before. We do have a light from Councilmember Klein.
Yes,
You'd like to speak before the staff presentation?
Yes, it's a procedural item, Madam Mayor. Given the time constraints, which I think you've wisely pointed out, I think that we should set some ground rules for ourselves so that the public can know where we're going and that we can perhaps get this done in time to get the other agenda items. So I would move that each council member be limited to 7 minutes, which is basically an hour for all of us, and that 7 minutes per council member include comments and staff time and responding to questions from that council member.
All right. Are you making that in the form of a motion?
Yeah.
Okay, so I need to have a second on that motion. Would you like to speak any further?
I think that the case is compelling, that we have so many things that we need to get done, and I think that this one, frankly, is most likely, I think, to go out for further evaluation in any event, so that I think this is not the time for us to go on and on and on something that's a very technical issue, and I hope that we can therefore limit how much time we each spend on this issue.
All right, Councilmember Scharf, would you like to speak to your second?
No.
Okay, Councilmember Schmid, you have your light on.
Yeah, I would just say I'm an enthusiastic fan of planning. This is an item which was first raised by the council in 2010, guidelines for the South El Camino Real. area. It's been raised several times since then, and it has wended its way through the Architectural Review Board, at least 3 or 4 meetings, through the PTC at 2 or 3 meetings. There was a great division of opinion in those meetings, and this is the first time it's come to us. I think it's an extremely important item. It is relevant to the item later on our agenda on the housing element. So I do not think that a constraint on discussion is the best way to start this.
Councilmember Holman.
I concur with the comments just made by Councilmember Schmidt. Further, I would say that this is there are a lot of details to the proposal before us. There are questions about the ordinance and clarifications about the ordinance. This has been out there, as Councilmember Schmidt said, since 2010. The colleagues' memo is over a year old. Planning and Transportation ARB had at least 2 cracks at it apiece. I think this deserves a thorough vetting by this body. And I think to curtail councilmember comments is to presume an outcome that is unknown.
Councilmember Burt.
2 points. One is that I'm concerned that we've, under one action item, have a proposal to both address the sidewalk issue and the floor area ratio issues, and I think that they should be agendized separately. I think it would be useful to have comments on both of them tonight, but if we try to struggle through with actions on both, then I think we're going to get bogged down. And second, I appreciate the desire to have this item move expeditiously, but I do concur that there are a lot of elements to this issue, and I would be fine with going along with the motion provided that we are, I guess we can't determine this yet, but we're willing to continue the item if we are not ready to take any of the recommended actions, and have the discussion continue after our break if we can't have it before then. And so I guess this is a question for maybe the maker and the seconder. Was it your intention that we would necessarily move to action tonight?
No, I think that you made 2 good points. I share your concern that this is really 2 items rather than 1. And one of the potential actions that the council could take after discussion is to continue. And I think that may be what the council chooses to do. But anyway, I'm in agreement with what you stated.
Well, I think I'm in agreement, but we could take action. We could take action or we could not take action. I mean, that's obviously up to the council. We could choose to table it. We could choose to do anything.
My question was different from that.
So what was your question then?
Whether it was the intention of the motion to necessarily take action tonight.
No, it was not. But I also thought since I have it, I also thought it was important to point out that my understanding of the motion is that you get your 7 minutes, but if someone makes a motion, you obviously can speak to the motion once the motion's on the table. And then if someone made a substitute motion, you could then speak again to that as we normally do in our procedures. So while we say 7 minutes, it could very well be more than that. And that's why I'm going along with this. I think in an initial round of whenever we talk or if someone motion on the floor, I think limiting it to that 7 minutes makes a lot of sense.
Why don't I explain? I've got 10 speakers here and 1 group of 5 for 10 minutes. And in consideration of limiting their time from 3 to 2 minutes, I guess that does mean that we're abbreviating the speakers. So I'm thinking that if we're having this much trouble trying to figure out how we're going to take this item up, I agree with Councilmember Burt that we probably will need to bring this up more substantively later on when we can vet some of the issues that are here and perhaps give staff further direction. I'm not sure, but I would like to see if we can get through, of course, the speakers, but some portion of the council thinking so that we can see where this is headed. And so, Vice Mayor Niss, you have a question.
Yeah. My question is for you, Pat. I think I heard you say you would like to separate these two items. Was that something you wanted to have included in the motion, or was that a suggestion?
No, it's, my notion is that when they return to the council, they would come as separate action items. That would enable our preliminary questions and comments on both of them tonight under this action.
So if nothing were to happen tonight, what you would hope would happen is it would come back as two different topics.
Correct.
Okay, I would concur with that.
Call the vote.
Councilmember Berman?
Yeah, I'm ready to vote whenever you guys are.
All right, let's go ahead and vote. And that motion passes with Councilmember Holman and Schmid voting no. And I didn't even take into consideration the staff presentation on this, which I know is also substantive. So this will definitely take over 1 hour. And I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you. Mayor Shepherd, council members.
Can I ask a procedural question first?
Sure.
You had said that there are how many speaker cards?
I have 20 and then one group of 5. So if we give them 3 minutes each, that's 40 minutes.
20 in one group?
I guess
I have 10 cards at 3 minutes each, and then.
Right. So I guess, it's such a substantive item. I guess I have concerns about cutting time. To save 20 minutes, 20 minutes is 20 minutes, but I guess I have some concerns about cutting speaker time from 3 minutes to 2 minutes on such a large topic.
Well, we can keep it at 3 minutes. I'm fine with that. We will be possibly not getting to some other really important items tonight, and it sounds like this is going to be coming back to us. So maybe we can have an early motion then about how it could come back to us so that we can get to that stage. Well, I'm sorry, this is where I would like to have a little bit of direction. You're telling me it's my choice for, I'm sorry, the time. Well, let me see if there's any more speaker cards. If we get more speaker cards, then we'll keep it at 3 minutes and then move into question and comments. Question and comments of colleagues. Let's go ahead with the presentation now, Hillary.
Thank you, Mayor Shepherd. Council members, Hillary Gittleman, the Planning Director. I'm joined by Amy French, our Chief Planning Official, and our presentation will, I hope, be brief. We do have some slides to show to you, and we're fortunate that Amy is here. Amy was here when the colleagues' memo was presented, as I was not. She was also here when the South El Camino guidelines were prepared in 2002 and when they were codified in part in 2005. So she has some tenure with these issues. We're going to hear her presentation. Following that, there are representatives of the ARB and the Planning Commission here to speak to council. Obviously, we want to hear the public comment, and then staff would appreciate an opportunity to respond to items that the public raises in their comments. Also wanted to note that we did send some written responses to Councilmember Holman's questions and requests this afternoon. I hope you all have those at your places. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. Mayor Shepherd and council members, Amy French, presenting the draft ordinance and recommendations, along with some background, including the relationship between the zoning code and the guidelines. The Grand Boulevard vision is of a multimodal transportation corridor with meaningful destinations. It seeks an integrated pedestrian environment with wide, continuous sidewalks, landscaping, lighting, and signage, all with human-scale details. This slide shows a sidewalk of 18 feet from curb face to building, allowing for an 8-foot wide walking zone, 4-foot wide spill-out zone, and 6-foot wide amenity zone. Since the Caltrans sidewalk right-of-way is 8 feet in width, we would need a 10-foot building setback in order to achieve a continuous 18-foot sidewalk setback without encroaching into the roadway. So the South El Camino Real guidelines that staff and the ARB have been following since 2002, when the ARB recommended them for interim use, we have been using the build-to line and effective sidewalk width language since that time. The 2005 zoning code did incorporate these guidelines extensively, the build-to line, the effective sidewalk, as well as context and compatibility and building facade criteria. We have the context-based design criteria that we use heavily. The 2005 code had a setback range that began at 0 feet, okay? It did not require a 4-foot minimum setback. The code had an effective sidewalk, but it didn't include a definition of this. The zoning code lot area definition doesn't allow an owner to include the area of the front setback in the area to calculate FAR if there's been an easement across it to provide a public walkway. So this is a penalty that exists. This is a slide from the South El Camino guidelines of 2002. It was modified a bit to show what we're aiming at, which is 12 to 18 foot wide sidewalks. And then we have a few slides coming up showing the existing conditions on El Camino, just a sampling. Here's one that shows the build-to line in the code that asks that 50% of the building frontage be at 12 feet at that setback, regardless of use. We have, some buildings have kind of false arcades where the columns are located 12 feet from the curb, but there's no walking area underneath because, again, the build-to line requires this frontage of the wall at 12 feet. We have the older code from 1998, when I first arrived here, that required a 10-foot setback and in the CN zone, and it had to be landscaped with a landscape screen. This harkens back to the 1979 El Camino guidelines that Council adopted way back when. This was just for the CN zone. The CC and CS zones did not require this 10-foot setback and screening. So Council provided direction in 2013 about the sidewalks and building setbacks, and again in 2014 for the FAR. And we combine this into one single ordinance, Chapter 1816, that's before you. We listened. We conducted a joint meeting with the Planning and Transportation Commission and ARB back in July of 2013. We had several public hearings about a draft concept and sidewalk ordinance. We had a community meeting, and we invited the property owners along El Camino to share their concerns and opinions. We held a presentation about the Grand Boulevard in April with the Planning Commission. So the ordinance deletes the build-to line for the roadways in town in those zones, CS, CN, CC, except for the El Camino Real properties. It provides more flexibility, even giving the build-to line. The ordinance requires a 4-foot minimum setback at the ground floor to achieve this 12-foot effective sidewalk, and up to a 10-foot sidewalk setback to achieve the 18-foot setback or sidewalk width that is noted as desirable. And this all depends on context. It allows the ARB to have a role in that. And we do have ARB member, Vice Chair Randy Popp, to speak briefly with a few remarks. The ordinance allows upper floors and columns to be placed closer. We have a proposed effective sidewalk width definition. Again, the existing code does not. We have a part of the ordinance includes a definition for lot area that addresses this easement across private property for public sidewalk. We reference the context-based design criteria. We amended that. Again, flexibility based on land use, lot size, other items. We get to the FAR direction for those 32 CN-zoned housing sites. It is different than the other items about the sidewalk. It goes from a 1-to-1 FAR to a 0.8-to-1 FAR, inclusive of 0.4 non-residential, 0.4 residential. And this was, again, if a developer chooses to go higher on their density, up to 20 units per acre. We have a few bullets that share what the property owners conveyed at our hearing, at our meeting, and in the public hearings. And then we have our recommendations. We have the ordinance that you have, attachment A. We have defer adoption until the issues are reviewed in a broader context during the comp plan update, and that's what the commission recommended. Or we have adopt a modified ordinance, the ARB, looking to delete the FAR change at this time and permitting a 9-foot wide effective sidewalk where appropriate for those storefronts for retail. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Amy, did you say that you wanted the ARB to speak to something?
Well, yes, I would say that Vice Chair Pop is here and the PTC representative is here as well.
So they're here for us to ask questions of if we'd like to. Okay. Because we can wait on that for when we get back from hearing from the public.
I think our thought was that each representative could make a brief statement to lead off the public comments.
Okay, so right now?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we hear from the Architectural Review Board? Randy?
Great. Good evening, Mayor Shepherd and council members. Thank you for this time. My name is Randy Pop, and I'm Vice Chair of the Architectural Review Board tonight, speaking on their behalf. What we're talking about here is aesthetics, safety, and comfort. Oh, excuse me. What we're talking about here is aesthetics, safety, and comfort. We are not likely to achieve a level similar to the Champs-Élysées, but we will make the experience of El Camino Real much more enjoyable and attractive both for vehicles and pedestrians. The Architectural Review Board recommends a minimum setback with a range. Each project which comes to us is evaluated based on context, and this is what the Architectural Review Board is for. El Camino Real is peppered with a wide range of uses and conditions, and no one solution will fit all. The impact and improvements this ordinance provides will be amplified at critical nodes and much less so at the connectors. This ordinance will help clarify and resolve the need for many of the exceptions the Architectural Review Board is asked to evaluate. Looking to the future, our hope is this set of regulations will make El Camino less of a freeway and more of a boulevard. In regard to the build-to line, on a project-by-project basis, we anticipate a different design approach for the street and upper levels. The entire concept is based on maintaining all current development rights. This will improve the street level and tree canopy as well. There is a subtle but added benefit of additional sidewalk area and what that might bring to a retail or hospitality tenant. The street life this ordinance will create and the environment it fosters will be beneficial in so many ways. The Architectural Review Board does not support reducing FAR when providing 20 dwelling units per acre. Within the current boundaries of FAR, unit size will be self-regulated. I have not studied this carefully, but it seems obvious that reduced FAR will erase the benefit for the increased density by nature of the demands the parking required to support those units imposes. We urge you not to include this limitation. Thank you.
And from Plan and Transportation, is that you, Art?
Yes, it is me.
Arthur.
Thank you. The Planning Transportation Commission was a short commission. We only had 4 members because at that time we had 5 and one of them was away at the time. So 3 of the members of the commission did not get a chance to weigh in. The ordinance was suggested to defer to our Palo Alto process for the comprehensive plan update.
Some of the people felt that there were larger issues that they want to make changed to the, such as consideration of taller heights and things like that, and wanted it in the more comprehensive view. That was the vote of 3 people. They were also concerned that in terms of the rights of the property owners was the other concern expressed. The minority view was that the ordinance actually made simplifications and improvements. For example, the sidewalk width now is a minimum of 12 feet, and the minimum sidewalk width will remain 12 feet. But there would be discretion for the ARB to allow or increase this of that without the DEEs or required or other required for the Bill 2 lines. So that was what would happen there. I do note that I look forward to the discussion and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. I'm going to go out to the public now, and with that, we have one group of 5 that gets to speak for 10 minutes, and I'm going to call them up first as per our procedures, and that is Andrew Pierce is the head of those 5. The others, we have 15 now speakers, so I'm going to go ahead and limit this to 2 minutes each, and hopefully you can get your comments in within that time frame. So you will be speaking. So Andrew, you have 10 minutes starting right now.
I'm sorry, Mayor, could you open the public
hearing?
hearing?
I'm sorry, yes, I was reminded of this. I'm opening the public meeting.
Okay, that's fine.
The public hearing.
All right, thank you. Mayor Shepherd and members of the council, my name is Andrew Pierce. A lot of you know me as an 18-year resident formerly of Palo Alto. I lived in South Palo Alto from the time my daughter went to, well, till she graduated from Gunn. She started at Ohlone, so that's a long time. My law firm is still in Palo Alto, and also some of you may remember me from being on the Human Relations Commission for 2 terms, but that was a long time ago, about 10 years ago. I've been retained, and my law firm has been retained by a group of 14 South El Camino land owners who are very concerned about the sidewalk widening proposal. That is the only thing I'm here to speak about, not about FAR or number of units. After I've been asked to review whether there is a possible constitutional taking of land involved in this, and to tell you the truth, when I first got this, I was skeptical of that. It is a setback. A setback is a zoning tool that's commonly used. I remember my house had a big setback, but this one is different, and it's different for a couple of ways. And there is ample authority out there that suggests you may be getting yourself into a constitutional problem if you adopt this in its current form. The things that make this a little different from other setbacks, there's 3. First of all, this is the second time the city's gone to the well on this. The setbacks were increased also in 2005. Secondly, some of the properties we're talking about are quite deep, but others are not, and they have alleys in the back, and there would be potentially a serious impact on all development. And you can see that referenced in the staff report on page 5. The third thing, though, that I think is the greatest concern is that the purpose of this is for pedestrian access. It is really a right-of-way. A right-of-way is something a city has to pay for. You could ask that it be expanded on the other side. And of course, you could go into the street if you want a wider sidewalk. Why are we not doing that? Because it belongs to Caltrans. None of this belongs to the city. And the Caltrans, I'm sure, would have some thoughts about dedicating its property. So it's easier to go to the private sector. Or is it? The case law on this has not been friendly to cities. There was a case several years ago called William J. Jack Holmes Insurance Trust versus City of Fort Smith, Arkansas, where an exaction for a sidewalk was held to be unconstitutional. That was in 1990. More recently, there are 2 Oregon cases, one called McClure versus City of Springfield, and another called Scoro versus City of Portland. And in the Portland case, there was a required dedication of sidewalk, planting strip, and street trees. But the court found it was an unconstitutional taking. Now, I didn't find these all on my own. There's an article in the very exciting Zoning and Planning Law Report publication that came out in November 2010. And it's an article about how do you implement what's called complete streets. And this Grand Boulevard Initiative is an example of complete streets, trying to make streets friendly for all different modes of transportation. And the article concluded that the McClure and Scoro case suggests that exactions for the purpose of implementing a complete streets program may not fare very well in the courts. The biggest issue is finding the nexus and proportionality between the required improvements and the impacts arising from the particular development. And that's the case here. Somebody could be building something that was the exact same density or even less, and yet because it's a new development, they would have to provide more of a setback. And that is simply not constitutional. You cannot exact a right-of-way from somebody in that manner. Now, I'm not suggesting my law firm wants to sue the city. We've done it a couple of times. I don't want to do it again. What I am suggesting is, one, be careful in adopting something like this, because other cities that have done it have not fared well. I would comment generally as a former Palo Alton, a mistake was made with build to line. I think most of us think that who drive around town every day. But do you want to correct a mistake? You drive somebody over, you run over somebody in your car. Before you back it up again, you might want to take a look. And that's really what's happening here. We're going from one extreme to another. The Planning and Transportation Commission did vote not to adopt this or not to recommend this proposal. I know Commissioner Keller was in the minority on that, but they did vote not to adopt it after hearing from my clients and many other people about the negative effects. It will certainly affect the value of my client's property to have even uncertainty about development. Some of these buildings are quite old and could use redevelopment. In the case of fire or earthquake, there could be problems as well. And so I would urge the city to think very carefully about what amounts to taking a right-of-way without paying for it, because I don't think the courts are going to be very friendly to the city if that happens. I have no further comments at this time. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go into the individual comments now for this item, and you will have 2 minutes to speak. And the first speaker is Julie Handley, to be followed by Tracy May. And if you could line up so that it can move quickly, that would be appreciated.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Mm-hmm. I'm Julie Handley. My father has a Diners Garden Hotel, which is now mine. I run and manage it. We also own the property where it's currently leased to the Sea. It used to be Trader Vic's and formerly Diners Shack restaurant. It's a very famous piece of property. Anyway, this came to my attention. I also have a background in law, and I believe with Mr. Pierce that this does appear to be a taking. But that being said, my interest is much more personal because I do own that large piece of property on El Camino. And in fact, I might actually benefit from this in some way. However, I'm very much aware of the current conditions there. There are 3 major projects that are going up right now as we speak that are not in compliance with this, that basically preclude this part of El Camino ever being a real boulevard. In addition, we already have terrible traffic problems, terrible parking problems already. So I would just say that I think this should be put over, at the very least, over to the redevelopment organization as part of a whole general plan of redevelopment, and certainly not adopted as an individual proposition. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy May, to be followed by Kumaran Samanthaman.
Hi, my name is Tracy May. I own the property at 2080 El Camino Real. My family has been doing business on the El Camino Real since 1938. As I understand it, the city wants to turn El Camino Real into a 2 to 4-story residential buildings. This may work for some larger properties. However, for most of the owners on the El Camino Real, this will not work because the properties are small and lack needed depth and shape for this type of project. The city wants to take a sizable portion of land from miles of privately owned properties for this purpose of widening sidewalks. The city has taken other portions for alley use, and with other obstacles like severe building and land ratio restrictions, most property owners will have little usable property left, and in some cases, no usable property. They won't be able to sell it because it will be made useless. and worthless. How can the city do this to little businesses and property owners who serve the residents, offer employment opportunities, bring in revenue for the city, and try to make a living and work hard to support their families? Are 18-foot concrete sidewalks more important than people? In 2005, the city took approximately 400 square feet of my property to widen the sidewalks to 12 feet. According to the city records, no El Camino Real property owners were ever notified. I learned that my property had been taken out from under me a couple of months ago when the city notified me that they now wanted to take even more. Am I done?
That's 2 minutes.
Is
Can
that
you
2 minutes?
summarize in
Okay,
just
I'll
one
summarize it.
sentence? Yeah.
The Planning and Transportation Commission does not support the ordinance, and neither do I. I don't believe that there's much public support for this project, nor understanding on the part of the city of the effect it will have on the little property owners, their businesses, and their families. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And Kumaran Santhanan, to be followed by Brian Knudsen.
Thank you, City Council. My name is Kumaran Santhanam.
Thank you.
Apologize for that. I'd just like to say a few words. A lot has already been said, so I will try to get through this briefly. The Grand Boulevard Initiative aims to turn El Camino Real into a walkable row of shops stretching from Daly City to San Jose. It seems like a one-size-fits-all plan that isn't even consistent within the city of Palo Alto itself. As others have stated, the buildings are built to line, the sidewalk widths are varying throughout the city, so it's already inconsistent. And it's important to remember that El Camino Real is a 6-lane divided highway with a reasonably high speed limit. It's very hard to imagine pedestrians enjoying this on a leisurely stroll on a Sunday afternoon. So the Grand Boulevard Initiative really needs a lot more thought behind it before it can be used as justification. As several other people have mentioned, the PTC does not support this ordinance, and I won't go into that any further. And cutting into the property on El Camino Real, I really can't help but think that there could be disproportionate devaluation of property. You can't just prorate the number of square footage that was taken for the public thoroughfare. So as was stated before, it's a bigger issue that I urge the council to think about carefully before casting your vote. And to kind of summarize, for many years, ever since years ago I was a student at Stanford, I've been a regular patron of Palo Alto small businesses, and the owners of these small businesses are a large part of what makes Palo Alto such a vibrant community. I urge you to make the right decision and honor the rights of the city's property owners when you cast your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Knudsen, to be followed by Peter Eng.
Good evening. My name is Brian Knudsen. I'm connected to the property at 2080 El Camino Real. That's barbecues galore. My concerns about the widening of the sidewalk, as I understand, an effective sidewalk has several amenities, one of them being trees. You've got landscape, benches, etc. I believe, especially with trees, the visibility of small business would be decreased or could possibly be decreased by this trees and whatnot. These small businesses do depend on good visibility from the highway, and it will also affect the property owner's right when and if they decide to develop or sell their property. As you know, some properties are very small parcels. It seems these could become impossible to develop or sell under this new ordinance. I do question whether or not the required dedication of private property for public use is considered to be a taking of private property. I believe there should be further study on these items. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Eng, to be followed by Yatin Patel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Honorable City Council. I'm Peter Eng,
family is the owner of a piece of property on El Camino Real, 3944 El Camino Real. I think our building has already adequate setback, even with the new sidewalk under consideration. However, the picture that the planning department showed you looks great. I love pictures. However, that's not realistic. If the planning staff can go out there and determine what is the pedestrian traffic like and tell us about it, what is it not today and what they anticipate will be years from now, then I will buy it. For example, the staff really paints good picture for you. Let me go back to the Homer Street tunnel to the clinic. It came out that the staff say that there were 3,000 people walk through the tunnel a day. Just figure out how many that per hours. It's like a parade. I had never seen that many people. Again, is that a fact, or just grab a figure from the air and to impress people? I, as a person that are really interested in so-called statistic. However, to be that unreal, I question the validity of such finding. Again, the picture's great, but you will never see a sidewalk on El Camino to be that way. I can guarantee you that. I can put money on the table right here. So thank you very much for listening to me. And the staff never consider the economic aspect of any of their proposals. I think that ought to come first. Before just pipe dream. I like to dream, but that doesn't cut the mustard. Thank you very much for listening to me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yatin Patel to be followed by Ken Wang.
Good evening, Council. I think I just wanted to reiterate what has already been said today or tonight. Mainly that El Camino Real is really a highway. I think the idea that El Camino Real will be this vibrant, pedestrian-friendly thoroughfare through Palo Alto is misguided. Quite frankly, there's plenty of other places in Palo Alto that are pedestrian-friendly, that are actually places where people would want to go out for a stroll, namely University Avenue, California Avenue, Midtown, The Dish, anywhere but El Camino. The other thing is the inconsistencies that will be created are actually a problem. I mean, you may have a 12 to 18-foot sidewalk, on one block that may not even extend the entire block. My family owns a business at 3200 El Camino. Between ours and the next business, you may have, let's say if somebody wants to redevelop our property, a new buyer comes in, they've got the 18-foot sidewalk. Well, the business next to us isn't being redeveloped, and they've still got, let's say, 8 to 12 feet. So there's a major inconsistency until all of these lots get redeveloped. And the other thing is, the idea that people will maybe not develop their properties if they're subject to this 18-foot sidewalk if the new ordinance is passed. So it might chill development from existing owners until it passes to possibly a new developer. I think that's all I've got for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Wang to be followed by Sal.
Hi, my name is Ken Wang. Our family has been residents and also property owners of Palo Alto for some time, since 1979. And we have seen a lot of changes on El Camino in proposed zoning changes and so forth, including narrowing El Camino Real, widening, making a green street, making the sidewalk walkable now it's making a bike lane. So I think the issues here is that the planning process has not really taken into account the incentives for the property owners along the El Camino Real, or the impact on them, both legally as well as their property rights and then property value. I think the important thing is that we have opportunity now for you to consider, really go back, do your homework on finding out what the impact is, listen to the owners as well as the planners to figure out what's the right solution for your Camino Real. I think this idea of just doing piecemeal changes to the zoning, it does not make any sense to me. It's as if asking you to grow an arm at a time or leg at a time and try to build a person. That does not work. So I would strongly recommend you not to vote for any of these changes, but consider a larger scope of application on how to enhance the El Camino Real. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sal is our next speaker, to be followed by Joseph Riza.
My name is Al Giovanora. I own about 5 sites on El Camino, and they include 2 vacant lots with the cyclone fence, 3 retail space for about 15 years being vacant. I have an office building which used to be called the 10 building, has been vacant for about 10 years, 4,000 square feet. I told the realtor I will take a $5,000 gross a month just to have some tenant. That comes net about 80 cents a square foot, which I don't think anywhere in the world that is such a low rent. Anyway, the reason I haven't done nothing is because of bad zoning, and for what I can see now, you want to make it even worse. If you really want to see pretty El Camino, you have to, allow better density. And after all, they are zoned for housing. Everyone on my site is the one designated for housing. And so you should allow higher density, higher FAR, and maybe 4-story, 50 feet. And then something pretty will come. Otherwise, they'll be like that 20 years. They will keep being like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph Riza, to be followed by Robert Yell.
Thank you. My name is Joseph Riza. I'm a resident of Palo Alto for over 30 years. I own the property at 3401 El Camino at the corner of Fernando, which is at the beginning of the Grand Boulevard. We're currently a physical therapy and rehab services, provide services to the community. I'm here with the other property owners along the Grand Boulevard asking the City Council to reject the proposed plan to widen the sidewalks along El Camino and impose the tighter FAR guidelines to these properties in a commercial neighborhood. Since purchasing the property almost 20 years ago, I've come to the City Planning and Building Department on 3 occasions with ideas to plan and improve our property, only to be told that the building codes, including building heights, parking access, and prohibit us from improving the property. The primary obstacle is the lots from El Camino to the back alley are too narrow to allow for adequate parking, and the building heights there are low because of the residential neighborhood that's behind it. So while your idea of making El Camino Real a pedestrian-friendly area for residents to use, it's a noble dream, but let's not forget it's a transportation corridor. In the many meetings I've attended since this has all come up, I've yet to hear one person from the neighborhood come and support the proposed changes. I would also like to see El Camino a more inviting place for people to come. And we would like to see a combination of neighborhood-friendly businesses on the ground floor with adequate parking and residential or office on the 2nd and 3rd floor. In fact, it doesn't matter, the underground parking proposed by staff at the previous meetings is financially not feasible, and building heights restrictions are restrictive. Your proposal of increasing the housing density to 20 units per acre would help with the housing crunch along the transportation corridor, but a reduction of the floor area ratios, height restrictions, and limited parking access, along with the removal of the 10 feet from the front of the properties, does not provide property owners opportunities to improve their property. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Yell, to be followed by Ben Chintz.
Hi, my name is, can you hear me? My name is Robert Yee. I own the property at 3850 El Camino Rio. I've already lost one tenant because there's insufficient room to make remodeling feasible, and therefore they canceled the lease. This was due to parking requirements and ADA and so forth. Widening of this setback requirement to 18 feet would make it even more difficult for me to find another tenant. I still don't have a tenant right now. Therefore, changing the current ordinance would only increase blight on the barren part section of El Camino. I asked the city should instead do a comprehensive study of the parking and building height requirements, as well as the possibility of utilizing the alleyway that's behind my property, our property on that block, before rushing to pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben Sins, to be followed by Robert Moss.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Ben Sins, and I'm a resident of Palo Alto. I live in Midtown on Kipling Street, and my family has owned two properties that are developed on El Camino at 3567 and 3885 El Camino for about 50 years. I believe that there needs to be more outreach to the owners, to the property owners and the business owners and the community concerning this proposal. And as far as I'm aware, there was one meeting which property owners were invited and attended, in which they expressed their considerable concerns about this proposal. I believe that the ordinance particularly adversely impacts small property owners by replacing the current build-to line with a setback requirement. Many of the parcels on El Camino are small and many have alleys. The setback requirement will make it difficult for property owners to make substantial improvements or to redevelop those small properties because of the sidewalk setback and alley-related requirements. I understand that one of the reasons for the setback is a public reaction to buildings that have been built to the built-to line, such as the old Mickey's Market, where Grocery Outlet is now, and other properties where you have large parcels with the buildings built right up to the built-to line. I think that the city can address that issue, possibly even address it very quickly by simply removing that build-to line requirement, which is, as I understand it, went into effect in 2002. Remove that requirement. As I understand it, by that requirement being in place, it requires that a property owner, in effect, get a variance in order to build further back than he or she otherwise would. So I think this should be given more consideration. I think the Planning and Transformation Commission had the right idea.
Thank you. Robert Moss, to be followed by Herb Borak.
Thank you, Mayor Shepherd and council members. I also feel that it is inappropriate just to be talking about the sidewalk width. You should be looking at the entire aspect of the El Camino and El Camino design guidelines. And you should be involving everybody, not just the property owners of businesses along El Camino. This is not a new idea. The first El Camino design guidelines were studied in 1991. And we talked about it for 4 years, and it involved neighborhood associations, residents, property owners, tenants, not just the staff, but also consultants. And we came up with what looked like a reasonable plan for El Camino design guidelines, and since then we've modified that a number of times. The most recent one I have is this one from 2003. So what we should be doing is getting everybody, and I mean everybody, who's involved with El Camino on a committee, studying how we want to look at the entire aspect of what we have, what we'd like to have, and how we want to do it. Talking about increasing sidewalk widths only when new buildings are put in is kind of pointless, because you're going to end up with a patchwork. And it's not studying the entire aspect of what this community wants and what our business streets should look like. Step back, take a look at the entire environment, and most important, get the community involved. One final thing, talking about the CN zone. Speaking as one of the creators of the CN zone, there were 3 of us in Barron Park who created it, you should be reducing the intensity of use, minimizing any increase in, any increase in density and any increase in heights.
Thank you. Herb Borak, to be followed by Stephanie
Thank you. I would hope for future agendas there are more realistic time estimates shown. We're about 40 minutes into this since the staff presentation began, and there was a procedural discussion. And on this hour item, Councilmember Klein's motion would take up 63 minutes of the 60 minutes. So I think that kind of thinking should be going on for future agendas. In terms of widening the sidewalk, the question is it for public use, or is it so that some of it can be privatized? In the same way on University Avenue, we have the sidewalk being used by private businesses, which essentially just increases the rent to the property owner of the business, and also takes away the need for the same use in other locations. You know, if all of those sidewalk tables weren't there, you know, some of those properties where we've been told have to be rezoned to office space might be the properties that will be having restaurants for those tables and chairs. In regard to the CN zone, I think you have to be conscious of the fact that when the state reviews our proposed housing element update, they're going to want to be knowing what the site development regulations are if we have any CN zone properties being used to meet our quota. And they want to know if it's planning to be changed, because they're going to have to make a determination of whether our estimates of how many housing units can be used to meet our requirements can fit on the site based upon what the site development regulations are. And I don't know how you go about doing that, or whether you think it's possible to send the report without telling them that we might be changing the site development regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie Munoz, to be followed by Simon Sins.
Good evening, council members. I listened very carefully to the gentleman who said that there seemed to be some connection between the two close buildings to the street that were put up, notably on Alma, and the desire for greater sidewalk width in other places. And and I think there is a connection in the public mind that people do want buildings farther back from the street, but not on El Camino. El Camino is a through road. It's part of a road that goes some 400 miles from San Diego up to, at least to San Rafael, the old Royal Road, the state road of the Spanish government when Spain owned California. El Camino, which is now Highway 82, used to be 101. And when they put in the Bayshore Freeway, that seemed to be was the freeway, and El Camino was sort of relegated to second-last status. But still, as a through road, it is never going to be the Champs-Élysées. I just guarantee you, people are not going to get out of their cars and walk that little distance in South Palo Alto. For one thing, Palo Alto, as a part of a Grand Boulevard, is absolutely unsuited because Stanford has the right-of-way on the frontage for a mile, and including the Stanford Shopping Center, nobody is going to walk there, and you aren't even proposing that anybody should do that. One of the reasons that University is walkable or interesting is because the parking garage is here, and the walking is there. That's not the case with El Camino.
Thank you. Simon Sins, to be followed by Adina Levin.
Good evening. My name is Simon Sins. The Grand Boulevard plan and the proposed El Camino sidewalk ordinance will hurt small mom-and-pop independent businesses that make up a majority of the community-serving businesses along much of El Camino. Our family owns a property located at 3567 El Camino. Our tenant, Craft Mattress, has successfully been at this same location for over 40 years. Thousands of Palo Alto residents have purchased mattresses from here. This business depends heavily on its visibility to vehicle traffic on El Camino. This is the primary reason that Craft Mattress has remained at this location for so many years. At the heart of the proposed sidewalk ordinance is a changing El Camino from a currently vehicle-oriented street to a future pedestrian-oriented Grand Boulevard. This proposed change will make existing small businesses less visible to vehicle traffic. Increasing building setbacks and including more trees along the sidewalks will make it difficult to see these small businesses from passing vehicles. These stores will virtually disappear and not be visible to most of the people who drive along El Camino. If you take a look at this diagram here, this is taken from the Grand Boulevard brochure, page 15. The businesses are almost invisible. Turning El Camino into a pedestrian-oriented street begs the question, who will these pedestrians be and when will these pedestrians use the sidewalks? If small businesses had to just depend on the pedestrians that were walking the street, it would hurt them. They would not be able to survive. El Camino, the small businesses in El Camino require visibility to traffic, the thousands of cars that go up and down that street. These businesses will not be successful in a pedestrian-oriented environment. Please reject the proposed ordinance and preserve small independent businesses on El Camino. Thank you.
Thank you. Adina Levin, to be followed by Shawnee Kleinhaus.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Adina Levin with Friends of Caltrain and Peninsula Transportation Alternatives. We do support the Grand Boulevard initiatives and the overall goal to evolve El Camino into a place that is walkable and bikeable and people-friendly over time. It's true that El Camino was created as the highway, the Royal Road, but since then we have 101, we have 280, and the high-speed through traffic is on the highway, and the old kind of drive-in through burger and so on businesses is kind of the way of the past. And so while people are making very good points about the difficulty of phasing in change, we do support that change. It may make sense, given all of the considerations and design concerns and economic concerns, to weave that into the comprehensive plan, to consider it comprehensively. There are some examples to draw on. Menlo Park has a similar sidewalk setback, which presumably was cleared legally in their adopted specific plan. And Mountain View is currently in the plan. They're working on trying to figure out, for example, how to handle shared parking to address the uses of land that some of the smaller parcels here are struggling with, and also to look at the relative economic value. If you have a pedestrian-oriented street with trees where people stay and linger, does this harm businesses on the whole, or does it help businesses thrive? There may be an intuitive answer to you, or you may want to study that further later, but we strongly support that vision now. We're incorporating this into the comp plan in order to get that big picture of, regarding that vision. Thank you.
Thank you. And Shawnee Kleinhaus is our final speaker.
Thank you. Shawnee Kleinhaus, and I speak as a citizen. I don't speak for organization this time. And I'm just a citizen that used to live next to El Camino on Wilton. I don't live there anymore. But I used to walk on El Camino, and I always wondered, why aren't there some trees, and why isn't this a walkable place? And I think a lot of the developments that are so close to the roads right now are really encroaching on our sense of space, and that's why people are responding so harshly to the ideas of increasing density. A lot of it is really feeling that things are looming over us, and a little more space can allow more density as well if it's done right. And I think, that's just my personal opinion. And I don't know that I would look for a mattress store or some other store driving through. I'll look online, I'll find out where it is, and I'll go there. So the only things I will look in my car window and say, oh, that looks good, is a restaurant, right? Anything else, we don't use driving by and looking at the stores anymore. We actually look for what we want and we go there. So I think that things are changing, and El Camino needs to change too. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to close the public hearing. Now, staff would like to make comments for anything that they heard from the public?
Really, there's just one comment that I think we should respond to on the record. Mr. Pierce's suggestions at the top of the comments, and I would refer the council to the top of page 4 in your staff report. This is council packet page 528. We're very clear here that the ordinance is not requiring dedication of land for sidewalk purposes. What we're trying to legislate here is building setbacks, which is entirely within the city's purview, and maybe city attorney would like to add to this, but we feel confident about the ordinance we're presenting to you this evening. The only other thing I would say is, if we're going to get into the details, there is one typo that we found in the proposed ordinance on council packet page 537, and I would just say that the middle bullet on the bottom of the page needs to be struck. It was struck in the earlier section of the ordinance, but it didn't get struck in this.
Where it says section. Minimum 33% of sites.
Correct.
Side street built to setback.
Correct.
On page 537.
Correct.
Okay.
That's all I had to add. I don't know whether the city attorney would like to add to that. Thank you.
Jim?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a little bit ahead of schedule, but it's heading towards 9 o'clock. You all have already been meeting for 3 hours, including the closed session, and you've got an hour potentially for the council to speak. That gets us almost 10 o'clock. And there are 3 other items. The 19, the letter to Santa Clara County Transportation Project sales tax increase scheduled for a half hour. Number 20, the housing element scheduled for an hour, and the draft infrastructure plan and ballot language scheduled for 45 minutes. I would suggest at the most on item 21, we would divide those items and just take up direction on doing some additional polling for the ballot language question and reschedule the infrastructure plan for next week. And depending upon whether or not you think you're going to move through 18 quickly enough, whether you want to look at scheduling another special meeting or something. I've already asked the planning director whether or not, obviously, the housing element update item could be taken up another evening. I just put it forward to the council since, again, you're 2 hours away from your 11 o'clock ending time.
Well, I'd like to try to get through the housing element tonight at least, and so if we can do a check-in at 10 o'clock and see where we are, and we'll go ahead with our 7-minute rule right now, and I'm going to ask the Vice Mayor to time us. Actually, I have no lights on, so nobody wants to speak to this, apparently. Vice Mayor Niss does now.
Yeah, I'm not starting to speak yet, not my turn yet, but I do have a question about, you mentioned, Madam Mayor, earlier there was perhaps a need for another meeting, and did you want to discuss that at this point or the end of the meeting? And we had talked about this Wednesday, and we'd also talked about, I think, the 18th. Someone remind me of the exact dates.
Yes, it would be either this Wednesday, which we could quickly notice tomorrow morning as a special meeting and take up any of the items that we haven't finished tonight, or the 18th, but there is no quorum for the meeting in between. The Wednesday in between. So we're going to take that up at the end of this meeting as to whether or not we want to schedule something.
So maybe people can be thinking about that, though, as to which night they could make.
Councilmember Scharf, I have your light. Is this you?
About the timing stuff. I heard the city manager indicate that we should move off the infrastructure funding plan. I don't know if that entails letting people go and they don't have to wait to wait. So I thought maybe we should agree to that now. I mean, I don't think we're going to get more than one.
I think his question, though, is if we can get to the polling question on the item.
But I think we could handle that here at the staff. I know we have some public works and other folks here on the infrastructure
Staff can handle the polling
plan.
question, but not the other items on infrastructure. So is that an agreement? It looks like everybody's okay with that.
Okay.
So we'll try to get that far tonight. Okay, now I'm looking for lights for item number 18. Council.
I'd like to start it out.
Okay, Councilmember Holman.
Okay, I'll try to do the speed dial version of this. I guess part of what I found with the staff report was some frustration that it seemed as though that it hadn't been clearly articulated to the review bodies that the El Camino design and the Grand Boulevard Initiative both had been extensive studies that considered a lot of different things. And so it's a little frustrating to get back to, it's like, well, we don't want to just look at sidewalks alone. This was never about just sidewalks. So I don't know how it got kind of understood that way, but I'm going to tell you first what my concerns are about the ordinance and then go to some possible suggestions. So concerns about the ordinance are packet page 531 at the bottom, section 250. And this is kind of true throughout, where I have concerns about the vagary of the language. It talks about sidewalk width means face, packet page 531. And it talks about effective sidewalk width means blah, 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 blah. Inclusive of furnishings, plantings, including street trees, building columns, as long as columns are set back at least 9 feet from the curb, where the ground floor wall plane is set back significantly from the curb to provide recessed shading sidewalk area. But it doesn't set limits on how much furniture can encroach. It doesn't say that the buildings, as it does in the text of either the presentation or the staff report, that the columns are to create an arcade, a pedestrian arcade. So it seems like there's a lot of that left to interpretation. The packet page 535, number 8, the footnote number 8, says, for purposes of front yard setback, context shall include the property's land use. What land use? Adjacent and nearby properties, existing building setbacks proposed or adjacent building design, lot size, or similar considerations. What does any of that mean? So does it mean if it's retail, it's one thing? If it's, another use, it's something else? But the buildings are the buildings, and the buildings can change use. So I don't know what that means. And also, one of the questions I asked, and it's a hard one to answer, is adjacency. So does that mean that if the adjacent parcel or building has a zero lot line setback, does that mean that this one would have a zero lot line setback, even if it's like a major part of a block long? But because of that adjacency, it so what are we going to gain based on the vagary and the generality of the language here? That's like generally my concern about this language. Concerns about the ARB recommendations are because, again, they aren't even reflected clearly in the ordinance itself, as I read it. Says that columns can be as close as 9 feet. Again, it doesn't say this to create an arcade. And then on 19 of the slides, it says that ARB specifically recommended deleting the FAR change and permitting a 9-foot effective sidewalk where appropriate for retail frontages. 9 feet is 3 feet less than what we have now. So how is that an improvement? So I'm not getting that that's where we're going. I think somehow or other we seem to have lost sight of the colleagues' memo itself. Reading from the South El Camino Design Guidelines themselves, it talks about, and I don't have page numbers on this, I'm sorry, but it talks about a pedestrian-oriented 12-foot sidewalk. It doesn't say effective, it talks about sidewalk. I thank staff for their clarification that this setback is not meant for the city. It's meant as an amenity space, actually, for the property owner. And if you said it differently, but I think that's what it's meant. It's not for the city is not taking that land. Number 5, point number 5, this is under guiding principles, A1A. Point 5 talks about buildings should have a minimum height of 25 feet, blah, blah, blah. 2- and 3-story buildings are strongly encouraged. What we're getting is 4-story buildings, And continuing on here, building facade should animate the street with ample door and window openings as well as amenities such as arcades, awnings, stairs, and balconies. Building facade should be articulated with clearly expressed bases, bodies, and roofs or parapets. That's not what we're getting on El Camino. And what the problem, part of the problem is that we have guidelines. We don't have standards. So for me, I almost see like some of these guidelines should be adopted as standards. And that's where we're going wrong, because we're getting 4-story monolithic buildings. We're not getting clearly articulated bases, bodies, and rooftops or parapets. On facade design, it talks about facade should animate the street. It talks about wall openings, transparent doors and windows must extend, blah, 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 and ample articulated doors and windows. No more than 20% of the window space may be covered by window signs. Look at the school. That was one of the slides in this. It's the windows that are there. No openings on the street, which says also maybe schools shouldn't be on El Camino, but there are no openings on the street, and the windows are all covered with signage. Alma Plaza is all covered by signage. Even though it's not El Camino design guidelines were often referenced in approving that project, and staff is acknowledging that. So it's just not me having bad memory on that. Something I've brought up with staff, a couple of members of staff recently, it talks about glazing. It says the use of reflective or dark tinted glasses is discouraged, especially at the ground level. It's because you want transparency. I think we should absolutely prohibit reflective glass. Architecturally valid details, 4.3.7, architecturally valid details. Details and features should be architecturally valid, not just decorations. I go around and see things that look like they're just things that have been applied to buildings. I think the ARB could do a much better job of saying no to applicants and get them to go back and integrate changes as opposed to applying something that looks like it's trying to accomplish the goal. And one last thing is like street frontage character. It talks about street frontage should have continuous ground floor commercial uses characterized by display windows, recessed entries, and amenities such as arcades, awnings, and seating areas. So anyway, I'll stop there. But we have good guidance. We're not
Thank
using
you.
it.
Councilmember Scharf.
That was my timer.
Oh,
That was my own timer.
Here.
That was
too.
my own timer, so I was
Okay.
within.
Go.
All right, thank you. So we have 3 possibilities you put before us tonight. I was a little unclear as to what the ARB's suggestion exactly was. Would it be then, how would that work, the ARB's suggestion, if you were to modify the ordinance?
I think if I could summarize the 3 choices, they are adopt the ordinance, defer the ordinance to a later date to allow a larger discussion, or the ARB suggestion was adopt a modified ordinance, and they suggested a couple different modifications, but the council could make modifications to this ordinance as long as those issues had been discussed by the ARB and the PTC. It wouldn't have to be referred back to them.
So let's say we deferred the ordinance to the discussion with Palo, our Palo Alto, which is what the Planning and Transportation Commission. How long a process do you envision that to be? You envision it to be an 18-month process in the comprehensive plan and before we adopt something, or do you envision it to come back quicker than that?
Well, we would have to give that some thought based on council direction today. The comprehensive plan schedule we've outlined has us trying to get to a completed comprehensive plan by the end of 2015. There's only so much we can do concurrently.
That's what I was getting at. I mean, you said it was a staff-intensive issue to take a comprehensive look at this. So I'm concerned, frankly, with that approach. I mean, I think it may be a very good approach. I'm just concerned how long we put it out. So that's why I'm asking the question.
I think we could certainly try and get do some work on a collective vision for the corridor and some of the qualitative goals and policies about the corridor. We might need to put off an actual ordinance language until after the comprehensive plan. But I think the commission's suggestion was that we take a more comprehensive look in the context of the comprehensive plan, and that might be first goals and policies, kind of vision for that corridor, and then secondly, and after the comp plan is adopted, look at zoning.
Okay, so one of my big concerns is the build-to-line requirement and how long that takes to implement. So one of the things I suppose we could do is defer the discussion in the context of the comprehensive plan, but have you bring back something quickly that's really limited, that does away with the build-to-line requirement. And maybe you could address whether or not that's possible, whether or not that makes sense in this context.
The complexity here, and maybe Amy can help me out with this, is that the build-to-line actually has some good aspects to it, as well as being problematic in some situations. If we showed a slide that had a sidewalk next to a parking lane, and what the build-to-line helps is to ensure that the buildings are up to the sidewalk and that you're not getting a gap between the sidewalk and the building face. Too much kind of loss of connection for the pedestrian to the building. So there are...
So couldn't you just simply have a rule that says that you don't have to build to the line, but you have to then extend the sidewalk if you don't? I mean, I don't understand why you'd have to allow a gap.
We could certainly look at that.
Or you could say build to whatever sidewalk width that you're going to allow currently, but you don't have to build to the line. That allows plazas, that allows, seating areas, all that without going through designing. There's no reason we could do that, or is there a reason that...
We could certainly do that. The current rule is that only 50% of the building has to be to the build-to line, which is the way the current code seeks to encourage those kind of plazas and seating areas in the building footprint.
So one of the concerns, and I think one of the residents mentioned it, is that I do think, people look at Hyatt Ricky's and it looms over. And you look at, Alma Plaza, it looms over. So how do we deal with that issue so we don't get any more of those, but we don't wait 2 years to do that? That's really my concern, is that we don't build more of those. And how do we deal with that without that happening? And what motion would I make to achieve that? That's really my question.
If I might weigh in, the current ordinance does eliminate the build-to line for every other thoroughfare in the CNCS throughout town. So it's just El Camino we're talking about keeping it.
Right, but I mean...
So it is surgical in that respect.
It is surgical. And so if we just had a motion that did away with the rest of the ordinance, or the other, that basically says, we're going to go defer this whole conversation, but we want to do away with the build-to-line outside of El Camino, would that be a targeted surgical approach that would make sense? Or not? Or is it just all too complicated to not take it? You got to help me out here to do the right thing.
I'm torn how to answer that. I think we've learned through the progress of bringing this ordinance forward that it's complicated. That trying to make a little surgical change ends up being a complicated conversation. Whether that would be small enough to, not find that again, I can't tell you on the spot, but we could certainly head in that direction and make only the change to the build-to line.
And I suppose when you came back with it, we could say, no, it makes sense or it doesn't make sense. Right? Okay. All right, well, I'll stop there for now.
Councilmember Burt.
Okay, I want to follow up on one of Councilmember Holman's questions about clarifying this on the page 528. Did I get that right? I'm sorry. Yeah, 528 at the bottom. It says that the ARB want to modify the minimum setback required to allow a minimum 9-foot effective sidewalk. And then we have on page 531 in the ordinance section, it talks about at the bottom having columns 9 feet from the curb. So I'm confused how we have the 12-foot sidewalk and have 9 feet. I'm not following something here.
Sure. Let me help out with that. Yeah, the ARB was talking about when there's a retail storefront, having a 9-foot setback from the curb is not the worst thing in the world because it's retail and you want to stand right next to that storefront. That's not in the ordinance. We did not put that in the ordinance.
And the staff report, I don't think makes that distinction.
It just said what the ARB had suggested, and that's why that's
well, it
an
didn't
alternate.
make the distinction about it being retail.
I see. Yeah, that was the intent of their discussion. As far as the columns, the discussion about the 9 feet from the curb face to the columns was to allow something like an arcade where you could walk under that arcade. I have a slide.
But I thought the arcade concept was from the 12 feet back to the 18.
Yeah, no, I think this slide shows it. From curb to column is 9 feet in this instance. Then the ground floor is set back at about 19 feet, the front wall of this, whereas the upper floor protrudes forward and is actually at 9 feet from the curb. So you're getting some of that floor area you lose down here at the upper floor, and you're providing an arcade, a true arcade, where you can have these columns forward of that 12-foot.
Okay. And then, granting that, we also had this issue about whether whatever setback we may have beyond the 12 feet, and whether that is being mandated as a sidewalk for pedestrians, or whether it's for other purposes like planters, furniture, and I forget where it is exactly in the staff report or the ordinance. Can you clarify whether that additional setback is sidewalk per se, or is it for other purposes?
So the 10-foot setback, that would be from the property line to the building front wall at the ground floor, that would provide that 18-foot effective sidewalk. Now, what do you include in that term, effective sidewalk? We include, as was suggested in the original guidelines, that does include tree wells. That does include other amenities. It could include seating as well. Because, again, we have this takings concern where we can't require them to dedicate sidewalk right-of-way across the front of a property.
And you say 10 feet?
Well, if you were to add the 8-foot right-of-way that is Caltrans from curb to property line, that's 8 feet. Then you add 10 foot of a setback, that's 18.
So we already have the 12, though. So that's part of what's the baseline reference is what I was getting confused by. I get it now. Okay. And then Randy Popp had mentioned that the ARB was looking at this range of 12 to 18 feet where, if I heard him right, the 18 feet was at critical nodes and less at connectors. Did I get this wrong? Oh, if you can be fast, because it's coming out of my pocket.
Yeah, this is really a context-based decision. It's not at a specific place, a certain dimension, but it's on a site-by-site basis dependent on how deep the sites are and how wide they are and what their context is on either side and their location, whether they're part of a connector or whether they're really part of a more intense node.
Okay, thank you. So I'll say that I share some of Councilmember Holman's concerns that the guidelines, if they're too vague, we just tend to, it's like our max FAR, where we never get a project that is below the max. And so my concern is that how do we set up something that might have context-based guidelines and not have them simply be that it's always going to be the minimum. And so I'd like to see that strengthen if we're going to consider something that has latitude. And then also the motion itself that we had back at council had talked about reducing the FAR in the CN zone. It didn't specifically state reducing the housing FAR. And it looks like all discussion that proceeded was only around the housing, not letting the boards and commissions look at what would be the best recommendation. So I think that's something that needs to be relooked at. That was how I remembered it, and we got at our places the motion, and that's correct. It doesn't say just the housing FAR. So I think we went through a process that didn't follow not only what I understood to be the intent of the motion, but also not the wording of the motion. So I guess I will say that I'd also be open to looking at modifying this 18 feet toward something like 15 feet. So it'd be the 12-foot current setback requirement and an additional 3 feet that's not sidewalk per se, but for these other purposes that were described. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Niss.
Well, that's a good segue then. Maybe I can pick up where.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to get them to turn their mics off.
Oh, yeah. Turn your mics off down there.
Mine's off.
I'm timing myself.
No, Pat's was off.
So Pat had just started down an interesting avenue, which is a 15-foot instead of an 18-foot, which I think is something we could look at. But let me reflect a number of things. I don't know how many of you here still are the small business owners that were here before. Because as I went through the number of cards and letters and so forth, we had emails, I certainly got 20, and maybe there were 25 or 30. And I'm really troubled because we all sit here representing all of you as to whether we're really doing that. I understand that this is I think in some way, an aesthetic move, but for the life of me, I cannot remember having recently just gone for a stroll on El Camino. And I don't want to stroll on El Camino. The speed limit is still fast. The fumes are really unpleasant. And so perhaps we're doing it more for the look than we are for the actual usage. Because I can't even imagine going to the mattress store or whatever that might be, just walking from my house, even though it'd probably be a mile. I'm not likely to walk over to shop on El Camino Real. And maybe a number of people do, and it simply isn't in my usual, in my usual daily routine. But it seems to me that is, and I don't even always agree with a number of people who spoke, including Bob Moss, but Bob talked about this as being a patchwork approach, a piecemeal approach, and to step back and look at the whole environment. And I think we really need to do that. So that brings me to another request as well, which deals with, several people mentioned the zigzag approach. As we're looking at this tonight, I am looking at this as though I'm driving down El Camino. I haven't any idea how deep these lots are. I have no idea what actually what they used to call the platting looks like. And I'm kind of at a loss because I'm hearing from a number of the owners and others that these are very shallow lots. Where do we begin to really impact the value? Andrew Pierce spoke to that very well by saying there are states where something like this has been seen as a taking. I'm not sure it may not be a legal taking. I'm wondering whether or not this is an ethical taking. This is difficult. We really are saying to people, when you go to build, you will have to have a different setback than what we currently have. You gave us some diagrams in here, but they're not, they're somewhat schematic. It's somewhat difficult to tell. It would also be very helpful if you brought forth what exists in other communities. Do we have other communities where we have an example of this, and so forth? I think Stephanie Munoz mentioned the Champs-Élysées and so forth, and I would certainly agree this is not the Champs-Élysées. It does not end at the Arc de Triomphe. It would be fun if it did. I think it may end up at San Jose City Hall, which is very tall, but it is not the Arc de Triomphe, believe me. So I think we need we need to think through what the end product looks like. It is so tempting to look at that beautiful picture you threw up there, even of the arches or of the Grand Boulevard, which I think I went to meetings on the Grand Boulevard now for 15 years. Is it longer than that? Something in that nature. And we haven't gotten very far with it in any way, shape, or form. So then to take it to the next step, if we're still looking at this as a Grand Boulevard, as a potential BRT, and we haven't ruled out the BRT. I don't know whether that may come along or not. But then with a lovely median that runs down the middle that has trees as well, something is getting canceled out, and I'm not sure what it is. I think maybe we just don't have a wide enough, avenue to start with. Maybe that's our problem. I also, thinking of this again, back to the zigzag, I'm thinking, am I sitting out there I'm trying to think of which shop I might be sitting at. I'm trying to think of a coffee shop that's on El Camino itself. The only place where you might see people sitting on El Camino, I think, is between Stanford Avenue heading down toward, I don't know. Pardon?
Cal Ave?
No, heading further than California Avenue. So that you're on El Camino. That's the only place I can think of where you might walk to get to one thing or another. Pardon? Two Starbucks. Well, that's a good reminder. Pete's clearly knows enough to not be out there. So looking at that, I want to know, what are the possibilities of getting, and I'm running on my own time, what are the possibilities of getting a far better picture of what this would look like, including plat maps and so forth? Is that a doable thing? You don't have to say so right now. You send me an email tomorrow. Tell me, can we or not? I mean, the plat maps exist. I'm sure we can go and take a look at them and get a general idea. So I greatly admire those of you who put this together. It's very appealing to look at. I'm struggling with how practical it is, especially after hearing from so many people tonight. I wish one person had come forward and said, this is a fabulous idea. We totally support it. Go for it. But I didn't hear that from anyone tonight. And as we said, as your representatives, we need to hear what you have to say. So I would be very in favor of continuing this. I did like Greg's idea, though, of altering the bill to the line. I think that has real merit. And the rest, I think, really needs to be massaged a lot more completely. Thank you.
Councilmember Price.
Got the plat maps? Did you get
those? Yes, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. One question. One of the issues that came up was the estimates of housing units at housing opportunity sites, and are we capable at this moment to say that, what kind of an impact that might be or not on some of the sites that we have preliminarily identified in terms of the housing element? Or is it premature to kind of go into that?
I don't have a good definitive answer for you. I mean, obviously that is something we would have to be concerned about, whether the state would see it as us trying to get around, the commitment we made when we increased the density on those sites to 20 units to the acre.
Okay, thank you. I'm not timing myself. I'm going to try to be pretty brief. I think the whole issue of the Grand Boulevard, I've been a proponent of that for a long, long time. I think the concepts are viable, and I think really the implementation of the Grand Boulevard depends on the political decisions and on the comprehensive plans and land use decisions made by each individual city along the corridor. In fact, some of the cities have been implementing Grand Boulevard type of designs and have been successful at it, and it's quite impressive. The vitality of economic development and economic activity on El Camino does require a variety of uses, including higher residential densities, and office and residential, so the Grand Boulevard actually looks at all of those elements. My concern is that, well, statement of fact, I don't think there's anyone in this room who thinks El Camino is beautiful. And we all come at it from a different perspective. We come as neighbors, we come as consumers, we come as property owners, and we come as people who use that corridor for a variety of purposes. I'm in favor of doing a little bit more study on this. I'm lining myself with the Planning and Transportation Commission. I very much like a lot of the core elements of the draft ordinance. I think you've done a very good job maintaining the flexibility, recognizing that the corridor is very complex, and frankly, all existing conditions versus what we could change to are going to result in a bit of a sawtooth kind of approach. If we were starting with a corridor from scratch, it might be a different story. I think the city is evolving. I think El Camino is evolving. I look forward to a time when actually people look forward to utilizing El Camino from other than just a thoroughfare, where they do walk and they do shop, and it's attractive and it's a safe environment. Again, I think the flexibility that you outline in the ordinance is very, very good, and I think you've given a lot of thought, as have the community members, Planning and Transportation, as well as the ARB. My only concern about the comments I'm making at this moment would be how much time it would take to get to a product that you would be able to get through the process. My experience as a city council member is that there is always going to be a time when people are never satisfied with the amount of outreach that's done, and I think that's an ongoing issue, and it's impossible to make everyone feel as if every issue is being addressed. I do think city staff works very hard to incorporate concerns, as the city council and staff members do, and all the boards and commissions, but we don't end up with a perfect product. I think it's premature to take action on the draft ordinance at this point. I do think a little more time is necessary, but my concern is that, as I just said quickly, is that I hope we don't do analysis paralysis that comes from too much analysis, and then we don't have an outcome that has some meaning, that drives some change along El Camino. I do think eventually consolidation of some of the smaller lots will make sense, does make sense. It's not saying it has to happen, but frankly, individual small lots do not lend themselves to a grander vision or a grander outcome. And the economic cycles that we go through, a lot of this will be market driven. So we want to provide the flexibility. I think you've done that. In my mind, other than the discussion of FAR, which I do support Councilmember Burt's comments, having that separated from this and have a more focused discussion is important. But those are my thoughts at this moment. And I do recognize the complexities of El Camino, and I also recognize that we have to do something, because it is not an attractive corridor, and we want to make it safe and attractive for everyone, and we want to constantly press for and promote economic vitality and support of property owners and businesses, because that is a very, very important commercial corridor in our community. And I think if we can add other incentives to make it possible to increase the vitality there, that would be to the city's benefit and to the benefit of everyone who uses the corridor. Those are my comments, and I'm speaking pretty quickly.
Thank you, Gail. Councilmember Schmid.
This is important, and there seems to be a building consensus that we need to go back and look at this seriously and thoroughly. Unfortunately, in about an hour, we're going to be voting our housing element. And it says that 43% of the housing units we see in this city over the next 8 years will be on South El Camino. That's one of the reasons we identified that for study. Let's talk about it, look about it. If we vote this, we want to put people in a place where they want to be, where it's good to live. I looked through the details of what we had from the PTC meetings and the ARB meetings. 170 pages of meetings. And I was a little shaken by the comments that kept coming out, that we're looking at the sidewalk issue and the build to issue. And let me just quote some of the things that kept coming up. Good urban design is to build a street wall. 2002 El Camino guidelines are tried to build a wall as continuous as possible. We're trying to build a wall along El Camino Real. We don't want an effective landscape screen. There should be a canyon. There should be no missing teeth. The ARB needs to address the missing tooth concern. Eliminating the build-to lines means the missing teeth will rear its head. Now, maybe that's just a little element there, but someone tonight said, Dynashack. Gee, from where I am, I think we've already lost the game. And if you've walked past the building that's being put up where Palo Alto Bowl is, that is more intimidating than 801 Alma or Alma Plaza. And if you walk 200 yards south of there to the Summerhill properties, it's even worse. Now, the scary part is, can people read our guidelines and say that's what it says? That's what El Camino will look like? I guess I read through the guidelines, and there's a different message in there. The guidelines, let me read a couple of statements from there. Street level facades should have numerous pedestrian amenities. Integrate building and landscape composition together. Building mass should be articulated to reflect a human scale. Building forms should be articulated as expressions of building use through scale of entry, windows, arcades, awnings, balconies. Building facade should animate the street. As someone said, the building should have a feeling to it. So how do we get, if we go back for more study, how do we make sure we don't end up with a debate over build two lines and sidewalks and miss out on the livable neighborhood we're trying to build, the human scale in it? I guess from what I've heard, what makes sense is we need to go back, but one of the messages that came out of the ARB is we need discretion. Each property needs discretion, but it's important to have guidelines. So what are the guidelines? Maybe a starting point for staff is to go through the El Camino guidelines and say, here are the things. It's not just sidewalk and the build-to lines, but there's a lot of material in there that gives a rich sense of what makes human livable scale, even on this grand boulevard. And come back to council with some suggestions and say, okay, what standards or guidelines do you think are appropriate? And I think it's important we do that in a timely manner so that when we vote the final housing element, we can with some confidence say we're helping build a neighborhood where we want people to be.
Is that it? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Councilmember Berman.
So I have to admit that I struggle with the Grand Boulevard concept. I see El Camino Real today, and I see this quaint, picturesque Grand Boulevard proposal, and I can't help but be remarkably skeptical. El Camino, as everyone agrees, is pretty ugly right now, and the Grand Boulevard proposal kind of makes it look like Mayberry. But these are long-term aspirations that we're having. This Grand Boulevard idea isn't meant to be accomplished tomorrow. This isn't like the Cal Ave Streetscape project where we start digging in April and we finish in December. So I view this issue, I view this conversation really as a 20-year goal, taking us to 2035 and beyond. And a lot's going to happen in the next 20 plus years. One thing is that we're going to grow. And I know that a lot of folks don't want to believe it, but it's going to happen. And while University and Cal Ave and Midtown are great shopping and retail areas right now, I think it makes a lot of sense for us to plan ahead and to set in place the regulations needed to encourage additional walkable retail and shopping areas in Palo Alto. Another change in the next 20 years, and one that I've given a speech about and I'm really excited about, is driverless cars. We're talking about El Camino Real, we're talking about a main thoroughfare through town. And while driverless cars sound really futuristic, they're not. They're happening right now. They're being tested today. They're expected to, the initial models are expected to hit the road in 2020. That's 6 years from now, and Google's trying to push that up a couple of years. Worldwide sales are predicted to hit, the first fully autonomous cars are going to hit the road in 2030. Worldwide sales are expected to hit 12 million cars in 2035, and by 2050, every car on the road is expected to be a totally self-driving car. You can take a nap, you can read the newspaper, there will be no looking out of the window if you don't want to. And that's, in my mind, the reality that we have to be planning for with this conversation. We have to keep some of this stuff in mind. So what do driverless cars mean? And I'm just choosing this as one example of how life's going to change in the next 20 years. But driverless cars are going to mean way less traffic. Cars are going to move faster. They're going to move more safely. We're going to need fewer lanes of traffic, and those lanes of traffic can be much narrower. Parking, the way we park is going to change dramatically, and this is going to free up even more space on areas like El Camino, where you're not going to need to park on El Camino. You can have a remote parking, and you use your iPhone, and you plug in when you want your car, and it just shows up. So this really means a lot of change in our lives and how we live over the next 20 years, over the next 25 years. And I think that with an effort like the Grand Boulevard concept that's really transformative, I think it's within that context that we need to be having these conversations. None of this is going to happen tomorrow, but that's not the conversation that we're having right now. So I want to ask those of you who are left, and thank you for bearing with us tonight, who own buildings on El Camino, how many of those buildings were there, just show of hands, how many were there in 2020, or in the year 2000? And so just lower them, keep them up if you don't mind for a second, but how many, so that was the ones that were there in 2000, how many were there in 1990, those same buildings? 1980, 1970. So that's 45 years ago, your buildings were built. So the changes that we're making to our zoning right now need to be planning for 45 years from now, or longer. I didn't go to 1960 and 1950, and they were 1940. So I mean, 50. But this is massive long-term planning that we're trying to do right now, and we need to keep that in mind. And we need to keep in mind the changes that are going to happen in society during that time, and we need to try to plan for that. So, I'm making kind of overarching comments right now because I know that this is coming back and that we're not going to be passing an ordinance tonight. I think that it makes sense to to change the Build 2 rules sooner than later. I don't think that's something that necessarily, I think it's nuanced as we've heard from staff, but I don't know that we really need that to be an 18-month conversation. But some of these other issues, I think, absolutely belong in our kind of comprehensive plan conversation or in our much longer-term planning conversation. And I know that staff has their plates full with the plan right now, but this is such an important part of Palo Alto. I think, Councilmember Schmid likes to talk about the future housing that's planned for El Camino, and to a certain extent, I think that makes sense. I'm not going to speak to every item on the housing element, but I think that El Camino, with the changes that will happen in technology and in the way we live over the next 15, 20, 25 years, is ripe for improvement. I didn't hear anybody come here today and say, El Camino's awesome, let's leave it the same, right? And so I think that we should have a conversation in the community with you guys, with our residents, about what we want to see El Camino look like in the future. Let's not be delusional, right? We're not going to turn it into the Grand Boulevard tomorrow, but let's try to make plans to make it a better place for businesses, for residents, for everybody. And so I think that's a longer term conversation. That's kind of where I was going with these comments. And I'll end there. How much time did I have? A minute.
You left, you wasted it. Councilmember Klein.
Excuse me, I will move the staff recommendation number 2 with 2 exceptions. One, that we direct staff to return to us as soon as reasonably possible with fixes to the build-to-line problem and changes in the FAR.
Okay, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Does he get 7 minutes or not?
I guess.
6.
Use up so much time.
Well, I got interrupted too by some people. I will speak fast, I hope. I think we really have not analyzed this problem correctly yet. And I think that's a lot of our problems stem from that. One, we've been looking to establish sort of uniform rules, and in a very divergent neighborhood. I don't think that works very well. It works perfectly well in a lot of areas of town or anywhere. My neighborhood, for example, was all created in 1950, so we have uniform lots, uniform rules, no problem. But this is a much more polyglot area, and trying to set one set of rules creates all types of problems, as we've heard from the individual landowners. And I think we also have a problem with what we're trying to accomplish. The Grand Boulevard, I think, needs to be re-examined. It sounds good, but I don't think it really applies to our section of El Camino. Maybe it will over the long haul, as my colleague Mr. Berman says, and I think that he may be right as to all those technology improvements, but then again, and I do remember that when I was a kid, there were lots of stories that everybody was going to take a helicopter to work. Oh, you remember that. Right. So I think we need to take a real look at how do we improve El Camino realistically. And while El Camino was certainly not pretty, and I must say that I agree with several of the comments, nobody walks on El Camino. You don't go there for fun. But you may go there for various forms of business. El Camino is not a disaster area. It does have a function in our community, and I think it serves it fairly well. And I think it may increasingly serve the function of providing for small businesses. I think that we're going to see California Avenue become a higher rent neighborhood. I think it's in process now. And where those small businesses are going to go, I think that the most likely place is El Camino, and those are businesses that we need in town for our citizens. So I think that one problem, and I think that we have in trying to create a Grand Boulevard, which is really not going to work very well, is the speed of traffic. I think not of the Champs-Élysées, which I've only seen a couple times in my life, but Michigan Avenue in Chicago and Fifth Avenue in New York City. Why do they work as pedestrian-friendly places that still carry traffic? Because the traffic, I think, is a lot lower speed. El Camino, the speed on El Camino is scary. And it also creates all types of feelings that are not friendly. So I think until you cure that problem, and I don't know how you're going to do that unless you go to the driverless cars, we have a real problem. So I think that we really need to go back to the drawing board, analyze these properties on a much more individualistic basis, and see where we're going with regard to a reasonable use of El Camino, not a grandiose one. And so I look forward to working on this. But I think that when we get to it, it's going to be a far different thing than we have before us tonight.
Vice Baroness, would you like to speak to your second?
Briefly, I did get my 7 minutes before. So I don't know if we quite need to go back to the drawing board, but I think what we need to do is really look at what the eventual changes would be if we actually went ahead with the ordinance that we talked about for tonight. Councilmember Burt, actually, I'm not surprised, he has his plat map with him. He unfurled it, and it's extremely impressive to see the unusual sizes of the lots. They are A to Z, and they're shaped sometimes like a lot we might expect, but a lot of them are kind of turned sideways, or they're very little tiny ones side by side. So I think that unless we have a realistic view of what we're actually dealing with, we're going to think of them sort of as a, just as the usual house lot kind of thing that tends to be a rectangle, a square, whatever it may be. So I think we're looking at a totally different animal, and one that really needs a good deal more study and a good deal more, I think, of the observations that we had tonight. I'm so glad so many people came out. It's always, I think, easier for us when we know what the concerns really are. And when people really show up, you're pretty sure that their concerns are very serious. So as we go forth with this, I think what we have said is, as it reads here, with possible fixes to the build-to-line and the FAR. So I don't think anything is in stone tonight, although Councilmember Scharf, I know, is pretty determined with the build-to-line. Are you comfortable with this as it is?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's, as I said, I had my 7 minutes, and that's my other 3.
Okay. Well, I haven't had my 7 minutes, so I'm going to jump in here.
Sure.
Thank you. And you can time me if you want to. I think I'm the one who lives closest to El Camino. I live 2 blocks away, and they're very short blocks with my neighborhood that was settled very early in the 20s with its kind of mini lots with homes in Southgate. And I have to agree with the comments made. I don't like walking on El Camino. I will ride my bike through the neighborhood, through Evergreen Park to get to the bike shops along El Camino. I walk on it only if I have to, and even then I don't like it. It is a hostile road. And some of the things that have been impressing me tonight is the silence that I've heard from the community. That I did reread the colleague's memo, and it talked about the outcry that we have for the building up to a line on El Camino. And I do believe that some of that could have been handled so much more differently with the way Stanford did their housing along Stanford Avenue, where they have porches and setbacks and such, but the driveways are in the back, so it really looks sweet and homey and Palo Alto, to tell you the truth, where some of the projects that have been built along El Camino are really just walls of housing. And yet at the same time, I'm not expecting anybody to be even along that area of Stanford, of El Camino. Those Stanford housing people don't walk along El Camino. Where they do walk and where they sit and have coffee is over at Town and Country, where there's a little parking lot in between the sidewalk and the shops. And that's very popular now that somebody's gone and invigorated it. I look at Los Altos, when you go down El Camino to Los Altos, and I see a couple of those same types of shopping centers that are set off and back. I look at the Whole Foods. That looks like something that's very approachable, and yet on the other side, you see an awful lot of very tall buildings that Mountain View has built. And so I do think that we have an opportunity here to take a look at El Camino and try to mimic more the Los Altos version of development than the Mountain View version of development, which I think is what the community is trying to get at. And so I think that this was where I was. Of course, I wish it could come tomorrow, but I know that the comprehensive plan has the Our Palo Alto outreach element to it. I think that this is a good suggestion to put this into that noodle so that we could get the thinking of the community. This will include the shopkeepers and the landowners. I'm not sure what the exchange might be, but I do think that it has to be contextual, the way you've described it, where it actually, you have to look at the lot. I've talked to a number of community members lately, and they say that every time we pass something, there's an exception. There's an exception to every project that we do. And when you look at the exceptions, it's because not every lot is exactly the same in Palo Alto. So there's always an accommodation or we get something that we want, a pull away from the sidewalk in order to get a little bit of breathing room between the sidewalk and a building in exchange for building into, for example, the mechanical room up in the, I remember we did that on one of the sites for 5 square feet, which we were going to have anyway on that project. We were going to have a 55-foot high building. This way we all actually got something we wanted, which was a pull away from the sidewalk, which is exactly what we're trying to look at here. So I think that it would be important for me to see some type of reliability of ordinance that our shopkeepers don't feel like we're giving away their property right now, because I know that that could be extremely scary, and that's not the position I want Palo Alto to be in, but I would like to see us position ourselves to go forward in some type of context-sensitive solution. With that, I will be supporting the motion, and then I'm going to go down the line of lights, which is Holman, Burt, and Berman, and then Schmidt. Councilmember Holman. And we don't have times on this one, but do we want to? Be quick. Yeah, let's try to be quick. Let's go ahead and give everybody 2 minutes so we can just measure what's going on. Councilmember Holman.
Yeah, when I was reading so quickly, I was trying to get a lot of things out there earlier. And the point I was trying to make was that we have in our South El Camino design guidelines some very strong, good criteria for building design that were developed over a number of years with professional design, with professional consultants, and with a lot of public outreach. I mean, I remember going to a number of different community meetings about the development of these guidelines. And you know, when I spoke earlier about, you know, what we're getting is monolithic buildings that don't differentiate the ground floor and the body and the top floor of the buildings. They aren't articulated differently. The 4th floor isn't set back, which is also something that's envisioned by the South El Camino design guidelines. So there are a number of things here that, you know, it's about building design. From my perspective, it doesn't take a whole lot more study. It's about how to deliver better buildings. Going back to the colleague's memo, it said in the 2nd paragraph, and how the buildings, there's a strong negative reaction about how buildings turn their backs on the public right-of-way due to building articulation and openings that reduce building mass. A course correction is needed that is grounded in design principles that inform architectural design and lead to better, more appropriate future development that addresses the street in a way that is consistent with the vision and the El Camino Design Guidelines Grand Boulevard. So it isn't all just about the sidewalk and about setbacks. So I'm going to offer an amendment here. I'm going to offer an amendment that would ask staff to return to the council with recommendations for incorporating building design and articulation components, the building design and articulation components in the South El Camino design guidelines as design standards found in sections 1.4, guiding principles, and 4.3, facade design.
Would you like to speak to your amendment, Councilmember Holman? I'm sorry, let me see if the maker of the motion, no and no, okay. Go ahead, can you speak to this, please?
Yeah, mostly I think I have. It's just, you know, these are not property rights issues. They're not issues that need a whole lot more fleshing out. It's like they've been studied in 2 different realms. They've been studied in the context of the South El Camino design guidelines. They've been studied in the context of the Grand Boulevard Initiative. And they both come to very, very common conclusions that buildings need to be articulated, that openings need to be punched in these walls, that windows shouldn't be covered over with posterization or whatever. So I just don't think we need to like study it and 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 study it. These are design standards that I think we should be incorporating. We don't adopt, because they're design guidelines, we don't utilize them to name a project, and I may get in trouble for this, but to name a project when the unveiling happens of the hotel that's taking the place of the Palo Alto Bowl, I think there will be huge public consternation, because it does not follow, specifically does not follow these design guidelines.
Is this still speaking to your amendment? Because
Yes,
I would
it
like
is.
to try to move this along.
Yes, it is. I'm
Okay.
speaking to why this is important to adopt.
Okay.
So, and I will stop there.
Okay, Councilmember Burt, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, I think that it may be that a lot of the council isn't very familiar with these guidelines, and they're really important. And actually what they do is they address, for instance, Councilmember Scharf had said, tell me what I can get that will try to prevent a bunch of these buildings and walled fortresses that we've had built there that we all see and don't like. This hits it a lot, and we actually have already had them very well vetted, and they're established. But as Councilmember Holman has stated, they're guidelines and not standards. So all we're doing here is asking staff to come back and take guidelines and turn them into something that'll have meat on the bone. And these guidelines will address many of the concerns that colleagues have expressed tonight. This is actually probably the most valuable thing that we can do in the near term to address what I think we all have shared concerns about. So that's why I'm supporting it.
Mayor Shepherd?
Yes.
Could I just ask a question of the, just to clarify the motion? We do have in our code, it's in section 4 of the ordinance, so I'm on packet page 540 and the subsequent pages. We do have sections in our current ordinance that are derived from the South El Camino Design Guidelines, and they're still guidelines here, but they include shalls, and they are interpretive. It takes some qualitative judgment to interpret them. It would be helpful for us to understand, how much farther the motion is suggesting we go from these shall statements. Do you want these actually quantified in a table form, like the earlier design standards, or is it just a question of editing and refreshing the diagrams of the text that's here?
My comment is, so currently under guidelines we don't have them as shalls. So right?
I'm referring to the municipal code sections that begin on page 540 of the packet.
Oh, so that's the existing code you're saying?
The existing code contains these diagrams and concepts that were drawn from the South El Camino Design Guidelines. So the guidelines were recommended in 2002, and then in 2005, the council incorporated quite a bit of them into the code, and they are in the municipal code today.
If I could speak to the amendment, these are not nearly as specific as what's in the design guidelines. These are much more general and do not enforce the design elements that are described, from my perspective, in the actual design guidelines. In the sections that I had referenced, which was 1.A, guiding principles, and 4.3, facade design.
I'm just echoing what Director Gittleman said. On page 542, for instance, the building base, it does say building facades articulated with a building base body and roof or parapet edge. So that exact wording from the guidelines are in the ordinance in the context-based design criteria. So it says it, how it says it, I guess, is what we're talking about.
Yes. It seems to me, because somehow or other we're not interpreting what's in the code currently to deliver buildings that reflect this guidance.
And sometimes that has to do with, I'll just jump in, about land use. In the case of the hotel you're mentioning, that did go through site and design, so there was opportunities at.
Yes, and I voted against it because of it didn't follow these guidelines. And I remember this response that came back from staff as well. They are just guidelines, and that was the issue. I remember it very, very clearly.
Karen, excuse me, Councilmember Holman, I don't have. Can you help me with your motion here also?
Yeah, I was trying to do that.
1.A guide. Do we have the 1.A and the 4.3 in our packet tonight? So are we voting on something that we have presented to us?
Yes, it was provided by staff in response to my questions, and what I have in front of me is what I printed off from what came back from staff.
Right, and I haven't done that, so I do have a concern about that I'm not sure all of us have taken that extra effort. So
it's returned, it's not posted.
Okay. But in what capacity to return?
They'll come back with their recommendations based on this. We're not voting tonight to adopt these. We're voting tonight to have staff return with a recommendation around this.
I guess what my concern is that I haven't been able to read the guiding principles and the facade design in order to see if
well,
that's
you
an
can
action.
have that cut at it when we actually have the action item.
Right.
So you can vote
well,
it
we're
down
taking,
at that time
right.
if you don't like them.
No, exactly, but I'm just trying to figure out how I can navigate right now in order to see whether or not I can support this
It's going to be
amendment.
imperfect because you haven't read them.
Well,
So
right.
Some of us have read them over the years too.
Yes,
So.
exactly. So that's what I was trying to get something to help me with a reference on that. So, Councilmember Burt, you're up next on this. Oh, I'm sorry, I've already called you on that. Councilmember Scharf.
So what I was hearing from staff is they're already incorporated. I mean, there seems to be a disconnect with what Councilmember Holman is saying and what staff's saying. It seems like they're incorporated. Are they incorporated or not?
Well, what I'm trying to say, I guess, is in 2005, the staff and the council went through exactly what's being suggested here. The guidelines were in existence from 2002, and in 2005, the council reviewed them, presumably with staff analysis, and adopted some of them pretty much verbatim into the code. There were some changes, and we've highlighted that in the staff report. And I think what the motion is requesting is that we go through that exercise again. We take the original guidelines and the code as it currently exists and see if there could be a further reconciliation between the two.
Now, to the maker and the second of the motion, do you guys assume that we'll be doing this earlier than doing it as part of the comprehensive plan update? You do. I could probably support this if it was part of the comprehensive plan update. Don't think I can support it. Or maybe staff doesn't care, but I mean, I'm getting the sense that this is a lot of work as well, or is this not a lot of work?
City Attorney just pointed out, if we're talking about 2 pages, the 2 pages that are referenced in the motion, then it's probably not a whole ton of work. I don't know whether that was the intent of the motion, just those 2 pages.
So it's just those 2 pages?
It's actually 3 pages, but they're very sparse copies. So again, I'm looking for clarification because what's in the code is not as clearly articulated as what's in the guidelines.
So what happened in 2005, what I'm gathering, is they went through those 2 or 3 pages. They chose some of them and didn't choose some of them. And what we'd be doing is re-looking at that and deciding whether or not to choose additional ones that were not chosen. Is that a fair statement? Or strengthening. Is that a fair statement?
I believe that's the case, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
What we did before didn't work.
Councilmember Schmidt.
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned a little bit that we've picked out 2 pages out of a 54-page report, and we don't have those pages in front of us. And I know there's valuable things in other parts of the report that it would be a shame to lose because we have 2 numbers down. Is there some way of adding a phrase in these pages and others selected by staff, or that way when you come back there can be a more general discussion?
I think these are the pages that reference building design. If staff identifies other pages in the design guidelines that they want to bring forward, you know, as
May I offer language that
sure
would be and any other guidelines that staff deems important to include. It's completely open to you. We're not prescribing that you have to go through all of them and do that. But if something leaps out to you as you go, gee, you know, we looked at it and we realized we missed this before and it's important, and we've had some bad projects come through because we didn't have it as a design standard.
Well, we're still struggling. Councilmember Schmidt, are you satisfied with that? Or what is it? I'm actually, I have a hard time with this because I don't have these guidelines in front of me.
Yeah, I think some subjective government discretion has to go in this, but there are parts of the elements that are strikingly questionable, where they say each facade, each cornice should look the same. So I think it is important that staff has some discretion in going through there. But I think it's not just building design, but it's also landscaping, transition zones from one building to the other. You know, there are a number of other elements in the design guidelines that are important. And I think looking through, you could identify those that you want to bring back to council. So yeah, I would accept the amendment, the clarification.
Okay, Councilmember Klein?
Well, we were moving along fine. Now this is why we get a bad reputation, I think, in the community. We're getting bogged down in minutia. My initial reaction was negative on this, and staff has only added to it by pointing out that A, we already have most of this in place. It was studied 9 years ago. But also, we worry that the staff doesn't do things fast enough, and then we give them another assignment on another assignment and another assignment. This amendment, I deliberately said another and another because it started out as one little 3-page reference, which none of us really had time to review since it was put at our places this evening. And now it's been added to anything else that we want to think about, or staff wants to think about. I don't think that's the way to do business at all. As I think Councilmember Scharf pointed out, I assumed that to the extent the staff thought it was necessary to have some more standards rather than guidelines, it would have brought that forth as part of the comprehensive plan process, rather than having still one more assignment having to come forward earlier. Standards versus guidelines is not a trivial issue. When you adopt a standard, you're saying that you really think that it has to be that way, and you're sure that you're absolutely right, and that the context might not justify something different. So I think that we're setting if we adopted this amendment, we're setting a bad precedent, both from a process standpoint and from a workload standpoint, and in deference to what previous councils have done.
Councilmember Price.
I concur with Councilmember Klein. I think the issue is what would be the value added of going along the lines of this amendment. I'm satisfied with what we have at this point, and I'm assuming that in the comprehensive plan, as we look at some of these items in a little bit more detail, some of this discussion will come up. And I am assuming that in the course of your review of projects and your evaluation of them, that you are incorporating the El Camino guidelines as part of your analysis. I do like guidelines because it provides some flexibility, and I'm assuming that you are doing that, and to the extent that you are, that's great. If you think you can do that more aggressively and more thoughtfully, then I encourage you to do that. I will not be supporting the amendment.
Vice Mayor Ness.
So, again, I'm going to associate with Klein and Price. I am convinced from what I'm hearing from Amy and Hillary, that this is incorporated, is how I'm hearing it. And if we're wrong, then we'll find out.
Councilmember Berman?
So I'm not inclined to support the amendment. If it were discrete, if it were kept at the section 1A of the guiding principles and 4.3 of facade design, I'd begrudgingly support it because that's very narrow in scope. And I would also, if that last bit were to be taken out, I would say to staff that, you put this not at the top of your priority list, because I know you have a lot of other things on your priority list. So if this last bit gets deleted and I support it and it gets approved, then I'll say now to staff, I know that you have a ton of other stuff on your plate, and so this I see as a bit of a get to when you can, not a make a mad rush to do it. If the last bit, which I think opens the scope up far too large, because not only would it be other guidelines that staff deems important to include, but I'm sure that when it came back to council members would use that opportunity to bring up everything else in these documents, and that is not something I'm interested in. I don't think we have the time for that type of a review right now, and so I won't support it with that last section in there.
All right, so I'll accept deletion of that last clause.
Well, as the maker,
Deletion.
as the maker of the amendment, so will I.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Okay.
Is that how you're going to go for it? Councilmember Sharp?
So we've deleted the last section, which is what I wanted to talk to, but then I also wanted to say, and that staff should bring this back. I'm with Councilmember Berman on the priority issue as well. And I'd like some language that says staff brings this back, soon, but it's not the top priority to get it back as quickly. I mean, they should bring it back, and hopefully they bring it back before, we get 2 years and we go through the whole comprehensive plan issue. But I don't feel like they have to bring it back 3 months from now even.
So would language that said that we'd return to council subsequent to the main motion action? So it's meaning sometime after that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Councilmember Holman?
I mean, I think staff got the point. So.
Yeah, so I'm not comfortable with that for this reason, because staff sent us a list of...
So you're not accepting that, is that what you're saying? Then we're going to have to leave it as that right now.
Well, so clarify this, and what does it mean, return to council subsequent main motion action?
So at a council meeting subsequent to the meeting that addresses
I just want to remind council members that we were sent a list of projects that are currently in the pipeline.
Again, are you accepting it or not? If you're not accepting it, then we're going to have to move on.
I think I have to.
I'm sorry, what was this? You've accepted this. So let's take a look at the motion. I'm going to make my comments now, and that is that since I don't have these guidelines in front of me and I have not studied them, I'm assuming that they work similar to the downtown urban design guidelines, where you refer to them when a project comes forward and you ask for those elements to be included in the architectural review board. And are we ignoring these guidelines when they come forward like this, or are we actually rigorously using these?
We are addressing them in the staff reports for formal architectural review as well as site design review. We refer to them, we supply them to the applicants. We refer to the context-based guidelines as well as the El Camino Real design guidelines.
Okay, I think I'm happy with the original motion, so I will not be supporting the amendment. Let's go ahead and call for the vote on the...
Can I have a clarification on that last phrase? I'm not sure what it means, subsequent to the main motion.
You mean after the main motion, right?
It means at a council meeting after we have the main motion returned to us.
What's the main motion? I can't see it.
Well, we haven't voted on the main motion yet.
Yeah, but...
So this is going to be an amendment to...
It's the stuff Larry had talked about.
So it would be...
At some council meeting after what we
after the comprehensive plan update comes to us.
No. Just, so if the main motion comes in a month, the amendment might come in 2 months, who knows?
Ah, okay.
Okay, are we ready to vote? Let's go ahead and vote. This is on the amendment. And that motion carries with council members, Vice Mayor Niss and Mayor Shepherd not voting for it, and Price and Klein also not voting for it. Sorry. And now this is incorporated into the main motion, if we could see the main motion. And I think we're ready to vote on the main motion now.
I have my light on.
All right. No, you don't, but now you do. Okay, Councilmember Sharp.
So I'd like to make an amendment that we take out the FAR, that the FAR issue comes back. I'd like to make an amendment that the FAR issue comes back with a comprehensive plan.
Second.
Yeah, I think that's what we meant.
I think
not
that's
what it says.
What's it say? Oh, I can't see what it says.
Scroll. They're trying to write.
Yeah, they're trying to capture.
Well,
And you're saying, Greg, you don't want any fixes to it?
No, I'm not saying that. I said I want it to come back when we talk about the comprehensive plan as a whole, not as called out to come back really quickly. I think it's a broad issue that should be dealt with in the comprehensive plan.
I don't disagree with him, but I didn't make the motion.
Is that accepted by the maker? No? Okay, then we'll need to have a second on this.
I seconded it.
Okay, Councilmember Scharf, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, just very
Or your
briefly.
amendment?
I think the FAR issue is an issue that is very complicated and involves a lot of different moving parts. And you do need outreach to the community. We've seen this with the building owners and with, there's issues with the housing element. And I think this is something that staff should bring back with a comprehensive plan as a whole as we go through this process, and it shouldn't be called out separately. And I think Larry made a good point about not calling out things separately when he talked about the other motion. I think this applies to that. I bought his argument.
Councilmember Berman, would you like to speak to your second?
Yes, thank you. So I want to thank Councilmember Sharp for making the amendment. I was convinced, and I was convinced by the merit of this amendment by reading through the Planning and Transportation Commission minutes, where there was a lot of talk about, and going back to my earlier conversation, FAR along El Camino is incredibly important and impacts a lot, and I think there is debate that can be had on whether it should shrink, whether it should increase, maybe different in different places. And that's a conversation that I think should be had under the guise of the comprehensive plan. That's the whole point of that conversation. And so, I think it would be unnecessary of us to pick that one element out and remove that from that broader context conversation that we're going to be having. I think the Build 2 issue is something that's a little less complicated. I think the FAR issue on El Camino is something that should be part of a bigger conversation. I'm going to stop repeating myself and turn my mic off.
Do we have the full motion up? Is this what you wanted to say?
Yeah, right there.
The amendment, delete and direct staff to return to council subsequent to the main motion.
Oh, that's not it.
And then issue come back with a comprehensive plan. Could you straighten that out, please, so that I can see what?
I need to see the top motion.
Delete the whole FAR section.
That's what she was trying to do. Go ahead, and Councilmember Burt, why don't you ask your question?
It's FAR related, but directed toward Councilmember Klein. In your main motion, were you intending that our consideration of FAR be restricted to the residential component?
I borrowed that language directly from what the staff had. I intended it to be neutral. And I think it is. But while I have the floor, Madam Mayor, I understand the purpose of the maker of the motion, the amendment, even though he's inconsistent in his reasoning. I don't care too much one way or the other. I think this is a very narrow issue, not a broad issue, and thus I went along with what Councilmember Burt was saying, and I think he is the main proponent of this, so I'm really interested in hearing what he has to say about this particular one.
Well, I think your motion's a good motion.
So you're saying that you're staying with the motion and not with this amendment, then? Is that what you?
Yeah, but we don't have to say how we're going to vote.
No, well, I'm just
want
trying to follow
clarification.
what is the difference between these two. Okay. In that case, I see no more lights, but I would like to see the motion stabilized. The amendment.
Is that Councilmember Berman? Looks good to me.
All right.
Said it, but
With no other lights, let's go ahead and vote. This is on the amendment, which is up here, that FAR issue for the CN zone sites where dwelling units are permitted to 20 units per acre come back as part of the comprehensive plan. Okay. Oh, and that motion carries with Councilmember Holman, Burt, Klein, and Schmid voting no. So now we have.
I have one other amendment.
All right.
In the staff report. Yes, I do. Council's original motion talked about the consideration of retail. And we've had some discussions here tonight about how important it is for small business to keep El Camino as vibrant and retail site. And I think we need to, and as Councilmember Burt pointed out to me, and I agreed with him wholeheartedly on this, the most vibrant area on El Camino is actually Cafe Baroni in Menlo Park.
That's true.
No, it is. And I think, and there are reasons for it. And I'd like to offer an amendment that as part of the comprehensive plan, I'm not calling out to come sooner, that staff looks at making it more vibrant in terms of retail. I'm not going to go more than that, but that was really the intention of, as staff put in the packet, said the council motion also requests consideration of the retail proportion of the FAR, including ground floor retail requirements. That's really what we were looking for, and I'd like to see us focus on that as part of the comprehensive plan.
I'll second.
Kate, would you like to speak further to your amendment?
Just very briefly.
Oh, it's been accepted by one of the makers?
Great.
Okay, it's been accepted.
You just want to be excited along El Camino and stop.
Councilmember Price, did you want to?
In concept, I agree. It's just that I feel like we're starting to reiterate things that already exist in our economic development plan. And we have, there are many parts of the comprehensive plan that already address this, but for the sake of moving ahead, I'll be supporting it. I think we got to keep moving.
Okay, with that, let's go ahead and vote.
Let's call it a day. We're on the main.
I'm sorry. Karen, what? Yes, I'm sorry. I thought you already spoke on this.
No, not to this. And I'll make it very, very brief. I will be supporting this, but I just think it's important to point out that the CN sites on El Camino, the FAR was increased in 2005 as a part of the zoning ordinance update from 0.9 to 1 to 1. I don't think that that's been pointed out to property owners. The FAR was increased. As a part of that increase, that 0.1 was to be for retail. But that's why I'm supporting this, and I think it's important.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote. And that motion passes unanimously, so congratulations.
We only took 3 hours.
Yeah. And we missed our 10 o'clock check-in, and we have, yes, I will. And that concludes our item number 18. Thank you for coming this evening and sharing your thinking. And this will, as you can tell, be returning at different parts of our comprehensive plan update and also individually with, as the motion so states. With that, we have item number 19 and item number 20 and a portion of item number 21.
I don't think we can do 20.
I'd like to know how far people are willing to go tonight to get our work done.
So I think we should have a special meeting on the housing element, at least on the Wednesday.
On Wednesday, this Wednesday.
I'm happy with this
7
Wednesday.
o'clock?
I'm happy. This Wednesday's fine, or the 18th. I'd prefer this Wednesday, frankly.
Yeah, I think that we need to have that go. I would rather see it go sooner than later. Can we meet at 7 o'clock? Can everybody make a 7 o'clock meeting on Wednesday?
Wait a second. I'd rather start at 6, frankly.
Can we all meet at 6 o'clock? Is 6 the same as 7? Okay, let's go ahead and, can you make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we have a council meeting on Wednesday and meet at 6 o'clock.
to take up?
To take up the housing element, and frankly, we might as well take up something else here as well. That's,
We need to just do the polling, I think, for the...
Well, you can do the polling tonight.
We should go quick.
We can do polling tonight.
But I'd rather take up the letter on Wednesday as well.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's just do 21.
Wait, Richard's got a thought.
Hang on, let's see if I have a second for this.
Second.
Okay, so do you want to speak to it at all? I don't think you need to,
Nancy, can we
Vice
find out
Mayor.
how many can come Wednesday night?
I think we've all decided that we can come, but I'm going to hear from people right now. Councilmember Price.
Yes, I said when this was first polled that I can only stay until 8 o'clock. If we do take the letter up on Wednesday, my request is that it be the first item.
Okay.
So I can talk to it?
Okay.
Can I ask the city clerk poll for the 4th and the 18th, please?
She did poll already, and she got partial information from some. But I do have a motion on the floor right now. So I'm sorry, what's your question?
I can't do the 18th.
I was just hoping that it could be polled for the 4th or the 18th, because...
The 4th is Wednesday.
I know.
Well, it's almost tomorrow, but yeah. This Wednesday.
Everyone can come Wednesday, and you need to leave at 8.
But we can start at 6 o'clock. Okay.
What's wrong with 5?
I work.
Teasing. I didn't mean it.
All right. All right. If there's no more comments, let's go ahead and vote this will be for a meeting at 6 o'clock on Wednesday to take up the housing element and the letter to Silicon Valley Leadership Group.
Will we get overtime?
Yeah, you get time and a half pay. And I have, abstaining? You've always wanted to use that button. All right, a double vote. I want to do that too. Okay, it looks like we're going to do that. We're going to go ahead and notice that. And we're going to take up, thank you for staying, those of you. And we have 2 speakers on item number 20, which is the housing element. And I'm happy to do it. Is it okay if we do take the speakers? They're here tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and take up the speakers on the housing element, and we also have speakers on the letter. I have 3 speakers on the letter. So why don't we go ahead and take the speakers for both of these right now. So item number 19, this is the, if you choose not to speak, that's fine as well, but let's go ahead and give you the opportunity. On item number 19, this is the letter that Policy and Services has drafted for the City Council to be sent down to Silicon Valley Leadership Group as they make their initial considerations for the sales tax revenue measure to be placed on the ballot this November. The first speaker is Stephen Rosenblum, to be followed by Richard Brand. And thank you for being so patient.
Well, I appreciate the late hour, and I'll try to be brief. I was very encouraged to read the response to the sales tax measure. I think it really brings out the importance of Caltrain to our community versus the heavy emphasis on the original proposal by the Senate Clara Valley Leadership Group, Silicon Valley Leadership Group, which emphasized BART more than Caltrain. And to me, the main place where the money should go is to the undergrounding of Caltrain. I think that was brought out quite well in the guidelines that accompanied as background to the letter, and I wholly support those guidelines. And I was also a little bit disturbed by the fact that the guidelines came out somewhat strongly against high-speed rail. I have no problem with high-speed rail if it's underground. In fact, if it were underground and we had our streets going over it, we probably wouldn't even notice it was there. And so I think I do support what the council is trying to do, and I hope that the sales tax is successful, and I certainly will do whatever I can to try to get it passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Brand, to be followed by Adina Levin.
Yeah, late good evening to council members, Madam Mayor, thank you, and Councilmember Price, thanks for the response to my note. I think you've all seen, so my recommendations to the letter is a one word, which I won't get into now. By the way, Richard Brand, 281 Addison. I am a member of the advisory committees on parking and on fiber to the home. And those committees are working well, and I give our city manager credit for those things working kind of well, and I'm going to get into that. But first of all, I've got a concern, and I think it's about equal time. Carl Gardino represents a special interest group. That's a little bit quick. How many minutes do we have? 3 minutes or 2?
Richard, you got another minute.
A minute? All right. Seriously, a special interest group doesn't represent the citizens of the county, and I think that we need to have equal time. The Bay Area Rail Alliance should have been invited to talk to the council, because I think there's equal time, and there's what I really see as a bigger issue. We're talking about transit that supports people that aren't going to park in our neighborhoods, and I think that CAC to support rail transit is something that you should look into as a bigger issue, because we're addressing piecemeal transit via Caltrain, rail, BART, whatever. I think there's an advisory group. Those things are working well. I can speak to it, and I'd recommend the council consider that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adina Levin, to be followed by Stephanie Munoz, and that was 3 minutes, yeah.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and council members of Adina Levin, Friends of Caltrain. Thank you very much for taking the strong stance in favor of funding Caltrain as part of this sales tax, and the strong support that we're seeing from Palo Alto, and then at least a back channel. I think we're seeing the same thing in the other North County cities is extremely helpful. Plus, these days, Caltrain is also critical to the success of the Diridon Station area plan in San Jose. So hopefully those things are already causing a good package of items to be in that suggestion for the ballot measure, and hopefully that will help it stick. One thing I did learn today in terms of opportunities for community feedback is, in addition to the VTA board meeting on the 5th, I believe there's going to be a study session later in the month, so that if community members are watching online, there will be an additional opportunity to actually weigh in and share thoughts on this ballot measure. One thing in reading the letter, there was some language that was slightly unclear to me in terms of the council priorities. Palo Alto is one of the couple of cities the most impacted by Caltrain's capacity issues, which are a high priority to my understanding as to what's proposed in the ballot measure. And there's also a desire to have grade separations, which are needed soon and increasingly needed as service increases. And the way that, if you read the letter, it seems to suggest that Palo Alto wants to do grade separations ahead of any capacity improvements, so that, even if we run out of room and stop being able to, take parked cars off the street, we want to do that. And when I read it, I was like, okay, is that what it's saying? That wasn't what I heard when I watched the rail committee talk on video or from the council members. So if you can take a look at that wording and how that looks and whether that conveys the intent of the priorities, that would be helpful, because it wasn't clear to me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Stephanie Munoz, this is speaking to the Silicon Valley leadership letter that we're sending in regards to their sales tax initiative.
Yes, I would like to say only one very brief thing. There has been a renewed interest in Caltrain that I haven't seen for a number of years that has come up because of this particular issue. I would like the council also now to go back and consider the high-speed rail segment from San Jose to San Francisco. I believe that having that high-speed rail have a special track and a special train going from San Jose to San Francisco and not stopping will, for very little gain to anybody, be at the expense of Caltrain, and funds and revenues and money that should and could be used for Caltrain. I've taken Caltrain for 60 years, and I think I'm really grateful to see that there's more attention being made. And I know that the objection to high-speed rail is going along and going along and going along, but we really need to know that this particular segment of high-speed rail will be at the expense of Caltrain. Thank you.
Thank you, and that concludes the comments for item number 19. I've got 2 speakers for item number 20, and this is in regards to our housing element. The first speaker is Steve Pierce, and this is, and the next speaker is Stephanie Munoz, and you will have 3 minutes.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, I'm Steve Pierce, longtime resident of Palo Alto, live in downtown North. And I'm here this evening to support the designation of the Arastradero sites as new housing sites within the housing element. These are really excellent sites for multi-family housing. And there's a number of reasons that are stated within Exhibit E of the staff report that you received. In general, these particular sites do meet almost all the criteria that you'll see in that staff report. They're large, they're underdeveloped, they're contiguous with the Terman Apartments as well as Alta Mesa Cemetery. It's always good to build things next to the cemetery. And importantly, within 3,000 feet of these sites, there's over 10,000 jobs. VMware and other companies. And so, you know, if indeed one does multifamily in this location, there's a good chance that they will be occupied by people who work nearby, which would actually reduce your peak hour vehicle flows. There's about 3 acres there. It would yield, depending on zoning, between 90 and 120 units. Now, I'm a co-owner of one of these sites, actually one that's located in the middle. And you know, the ownership group would be very willing to commit to doing rental housing, not for sale condominium housing on those locations, and would give preference to local workers. But the multifamily opportunity that we have at those Arastradero sites really is perishable. You know, the group that I represent has a financial incentive to put their property into a productive use, and they're really kind of financially, shall we say, ambivalent as to whether it's multifamily or single family. And if it's not designated for multifamily, then this group is going to build probably a couple of very large homes on a couple of very large lots. And because of the location of this property being sort of between the other properties in question, that would really sort of preclude in the future the other properties being really good sites for multifamily. So I can say as a resident of Palo Alto, as a former city planner, I think multifamily use really is the best for these particular parcels. What Palo Alto does not need is 2 more very expensive multi-million-dollar homes. What it really needs is more housing, and certainly rental housing. And I would just encourage you to really support what is, I think, a time-sensitive opportunity. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, could I ask the speaker a question?
Sure.
Sure.
Do I not recall this came up at one of your housing meetings? Am I wrong? The issue of changing
basically, I made this proposal to the
committee?
To the committee, correct. Which is,
I think there was a motion, though, but it didn't get a second. Do I recall that? I don't remember exactly. So if somebody could help me out, I'm not on that committee. But I think somebody actually brought it up, just so that it's on record that it was brought up.
Yeah, it's on record that it's brought up, and that's why it was included in your staff report.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Next speaker is Stephanie Munoz. You have 3 minutes.
Good evening, council members again. I have to start with what I think should be obvious and doesn't seem to be. If you build industry that requires workers, you have to have a place for the workers to live. Otherwise, you end up with favelas, like outside Brazil and in South America, slums, instant squatting slums that the police have to come and clear every few years and with great despair. If you do not build the housing for the workers close to the workplace, then where they do live has to, then when they live elsewhere, the farther away they live, the more people have to be inconvenienced, the more property owners have to be inconvenienced by their traverse from the home to the workplace. And that's what we're seeing now. The industry that Palo Alto built, starting with Xerox, starting with Stanford Industrial Park, spread down so that every town is now doing the same thing. Mountain View is just shamelessly doing the same thing that we're complaining about here. All industry, no place for the workers. And this county and the state have objected. And they've mildly objected and strongly objected. And their objections are considered a threat by us because we've hired a lobbyist and we're talking about increasing the terms of the city council solely so that we can have tenure on these ABAG, on these regional boards, so that we can pursue our own interest, which is to have more work without houses. I would like to suggest that you specifically consider the fact of the transportation on the housing in Arastradero. And my plan would be for the city of Palo Alto to buy the land, the entire trailer park property, the entire Gisser property, including the strip mall in front of it and the Valero gasoline station, because that is where the growth is going to come. That is where the value is going to come. If the city has it in hand, you will be able to build lots of low-income housing. You will have in hand the possibility of somewhat greater density, but in a kind of density that will not affect Arastradero traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the communication from the public on item number 20, the housing element, which we will be taking up on Wednesday evening. And we are going to go to our last item tonight, and a portion of our last item tonight, regarding a final polling with the real language that has been prepared, so that we can be much more confident with going out for both a transit occupancy tax and a utility users tax, and to see how the language polls, so that we can take action on June 16th. And so with that, I'm going to turn this over to staff for a report, and then also Councilmember Klein, if you're still interested in kicking off any portion of this from your committee, we can do that after. I'll let you two work that out.
I don't think we need all of us speaking, so go for it, Richard.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's been quiet all night.
I've been waiting upstairs. Thank you very much, Mayor Shepherd and council members. All we need is approval of the language that you see and the quotations up there, so that we can start the polling. And the issue here is we just want to make sure there's about a 2-week turnaround on the polling. We can't start the polling this week unless the language is approved. Theoretically we could, but we wouldn't want to do so and then bring back to you polling results you weren't happy with. So that's the language staff has proposed. We would then come back with a comprehensive report showing you the results of that polling, and then you could take a vote to authorize to put that on the November ballot. Also, we would present to you the infrastructure funding plan at that time. So this is the one critical piece, and you can add something on.
Thank you, Richard. City Attorney Molly Stump. And were we not also proposing to poll as well with the UUT language, so that both items would be polled together and the potential voters would have a picture of the full ballot, at least with respect to tax questions?
Thank you, Councilmember Klein. Did you want to make the motion to kick this off?
Yes, I'm moving on behalf of the Infrastructure Committee the motion which we adopted unanimously, which is that that the council directs staff to poll for the transient occupancy tax and utility users tax modernization.
Second.
Thank you. Would you like to speak further? Councilmember Scharf, would you like to speak further?
I just want to check the city attorney. That's perfectly good language. You're good with it on the...
Yes, it is. And maybe it would just be appropriate to point out briefly to the council that one aspect of the language on the TOT is that we had discussed with the committee, and the committee agreed that there should be some polling on some language modernization with respect to the TOT as well as the rate increase. And so you'll see that reflected in the last phrase there on the language above. And we are recommending that the council consider some language updates to ensure that the TOT continues to apply appropriately as different forms of travel arrangements are made these days, mostly on the internet.
Okay, thank you. And I see no lights on, so I'm assuming we are prepared to vote. And it sounds like we're prepared to vote. Oh, Councilmember Schmidt, you have a light.
Yeah, just a question. Are we approving that the question would include the modernization part of the question includes the Airbnb and VRBO and residential neighborhood rentals?
What you're voting on right now is just that polling be done on that question.
But it will be done on that question separately or as a unified question?
I think we discussed with the pollsters that they would be using a different format to be able to measure whether the addition of that element has any impact on the support for the item, which I think is what council wants to know.
Okay, it's a little tricky because we've had no discussion on that.
So just to be clear, you are not voting today to actually put that item on the ballot. That will come back to you, both the ballot question, which is that one sentence, and the entire ordinance, which would include all of the language that would go in the voter pamphlet and the actual law that would be enacted by the
Right, but
voters.
we'd get enough information to look at those separately.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
With that, I'm going to call for the vote. And that passes unanimously. And then to conclude this evening with council member questions, comments, and announcements, we did talk, or I did mention the fact that we could take up our council meetings at 5 o'clock for the next 3 meetings, if that's the wish of everybody. Because all of these will be full meetings with a lot of big items.
The 9th, the 16th, and the 23rd?
Right. And possibly even keeping Wednesday the 18th available. So does anybody have an objection to 5 o'clock besides Mark Berman? Okay, okay.
Excuse me, Mayor Shepherd, some of the public hearing notices cannot be heard before 7 because they've already been noticed through June. I just wanted to put that out
closed session. We've got other items that we can go ahead and take up. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. 5 o'clock is okay?
No, I'm not necessarily buying into doing that at this point in time. When I look at the June 23rd meeting, I don't see why, unless that gets loaded with additional items, why that would have to start at 5.
Well, I'm just saying we might not start them at 5, but we might need to start them at 5. So the question is whether or not we have that type of flexibility going forward with the last 3 meetings of the month, or if we want to tentatively schedule for the 18th to take items up on Wednesday.
Do you need a motion? I'd move that we give the mayor flexibility to start the meetings at 5 if necessary.
Second, good. If necessary.
Am I allowed to take up motions like this, Molly? It's not agendized.
Of course.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and vote on the motion for giving the mayor flexibility to work with staff on getting these items. Okay, that passes. And, okay, are there any other council member questions, comments, or announcements? With that, this meeting is adjourned.